Chapter 462. It was normal for Ding Meng to have this question. He had seen how powerful the super life form, Tree God, was. A special class interstellar fleet was sucked away by a black hole. Tree God at least had the ability to open a space-time rift, which was equivalent to the divine light technology warehouse on the expedition. However, it was precisely because the Tree God had used up a lot of energy to resist the fleet's attack and create the rift that the Soul Race took advantage of. Now, Ding Meng had completely figured out the ins and outs of the matter. The crisis of the Green Tree Race did not come from the Divine War Alliance, but from the underground prison. Ding Meng said, "You said that I came from 10,000 light years away. Then, do you know the specific coordinates of a place 10,000 light years away?" Tree God said, "Sorry, with my ability, I can only know the situation within 800 light years. Beyond this distance is beyond my ability." Ding Meng was a little disappointed. It seemed that his wish to return to the Dashing Kingdom would have to wait. For a moment, Ding Meng fell into deep thought. 6 years had passed in the blink of an eye. He did not know what the Dashing Kingdom was like now. Were his brother and the princess still alive? Was Sister Wenhe still guarding the border? Was Madame Muse still at Celestial Heaven's gate? After all, there were too many wishes that he could not fulfill on that land. Tree God seemed to know his thoughts. "The Chosen One, you have completed the mission here. Quickly return to where you came from. Since you have the will of my race, you will meet the king of my race sooner or later. When the time comes, ask the Master, and the Master will definitely give you some guidance." Ding Meng nodded. "Thank you," Tree God said. "My soul is currently suppressed. There will not be any changes in the short term. Thank you for your help. This is a small gift for me. I hope it will be useful to you." As soon as the voice fell, the air near the face fluctuated slightly again. A small item fell from the sky. Ding Meng reached out and caught it. It seemed to be a green apple. This apple was very similar to the fruit bestowed by the Tree God in the worship hall, but it was different because its surface was extremely smooth and had an attractive color. It was filled with a soft and agile energy. "What's this?" Ding Meng was curious. The Tree God said, "The Green Tree God fruit is not of much use to ordinary people, but it is of great help to the Chosen One. On average, it takes 500 years to breed one. I suggest you take it when you have enough time." It actually took such a long time to breed one. It seemed that this thing was very precious. Ding Meng carefully put away the fruit. At this moment, a narrow spatial crack opened in the middle of the plaza, and the situation of the Myrteus City Palace could be seen clearly. The Tree God said, "I'm very sorry. With my ability, I can actually send you back to a place 588 light years away. However, I can't use a large amount of spiritual power in the short term. For the safety of the Green Tree Clan on Planet 36, I can only send you back to the ground." "Understood." Ding Meng immediately waved at Jiang Ning, who was still in a daze nearby. Jiang Ning was probably communicating with the Tree God through telepathy. She was in a daze and kept nodding. When the communication ended, Jiang Ning slowly walked towards the spatial crack. With a swoosh, after a white light flashed, Ding Meng and Jiang Ning's figures appeared in the plaza of the palace. At this moment, they could see starships and spaceships all over the sky. It did not seem to be the Second Fleet. Could it be that Kataga's reinforcements had arrived? As expected, the moment they returned to the ground, there was a movement on the wrist device. After the light screen was generated, Kataga's face appeared on the screen. "You're in the palace?" Kataga asked. Ding Meng said, "Come down, it's safe now." Starships could not land in the palace, so the ones that landed were naturally transport ships. Kataga, Ding Meng, Ling Yun, Nicole, and the others quickly arrived at the plaza of the palace. Seeing Jiang Ning's unpredictable expression, Kataga was a little alarmed. "Where's Xiyan?" Ding Meng said, "He's not here." Kataga was puzzled. "He's not here." Ding Meng said, "He's not here, and he can't come back." Kataga was a smart person. When he heard Ding Meng's reply, he knew that Xiyan had most likely been killed by Ding Meng. Xian's people had always been united. Now that only Jiang Ning was left, they were probably wiped out. Kataga turned on the light screen, and a small light screen appeared. He walked towards Jiangning and said sternly, "This is the highest authority of the Alliance headquarters. The Third Fleet has arrived, and I have full authority to command the two fleets. I have received a notification from the headquarters to immediately evacuate from Planet 36 and return as soon as possible." Jiangning nodded dejectedly. "Understood." Ling Yan also walked up. "Ding Meng, did you see my father and the two high priests?" Ding Meng sighed secretly. He could not tell Ling Yun and her brother in detail about the underground prison, so he could only sigh. "I saw the tree god again." "Oh." Ling Yun and Ling Jian were immediately interested. "What did it say?" Ding Meng sighed. "I help you pass on its will. You are still the new ruler of the Green Tree race. It wants you to protect this land well. As for your father and the two high priests, the tree god has other arrangements." Ling Yun and the others immediately covered their foreheads and waved gently to the sky, indicating that they respected the tree god's will. Cadigus said, "Brother Ding, aren't you going to the God War Starfield? This time, we can finally return with peace of mind. I said before that if we can settle things here peacefully, I will definitely bring you guys back to the Star Ring. How about it? Are you interested in joining our long voyage alliance?" Kartika didn't have a good understanding of Ding Meng's strength, but the fact that Ding Meng was able to single-handedly deal with Ji Yan's group had caused him to have a whole new level of respect for Ding Meng. In the end, it was still because Ding Meng was too young. A 25-year-old combat master was simply too rare. Of course, if he had known that Ding Meng was already a champion, he might have even knelt down and begged him. After all, which sect wouldn't want such a talent? If this was in the past, Ding Meng would naturally not agree to this request. However, it seemed that joining the God Wars Alliance was a good choice. Returning to the Grand Prosperous Kingdom was not realistic, but returning to the Holy Grail Federation would require the help of the God Wars Alliance. The distance of 588 light-years was too long to rely on interstellar travel alone. Even if the starship flew in a curved state, it would probably take more than half a century. They would still have to rely on a space jump to return. At least now that they had determined the interstellar coordinates of the Holy Grail Federation, what they lacked was starships and energy, but these could be slowly obtained. "Then when do we set off?" Ding Meng asked. Cadigus said, "The order I received was to return immediately." This meant that they were going back immediately. Ding Meng stepped forward decisively. "Ding Meng, I also want to go to the God War Starfield." If she wanted to go, Elephant and the others would naturally follow. Moreover, looking at how excited Elephant, Junior Leopard, and the others were all rubbing their hands together, this decision must have been discussed long ago. Light Bird flapped its wings and flew to Nakona's shoulder. "I want to stay." Ding Meng asked curiously, "You want to stay here?" Light Bird smiled and said, "I promised their god and Miss Nakona that I will stay and help them deal with the pollution in the periphery of the deep forest." Cadigus said, "This is a good thing. We will also leave resources to help the peripheral tribes rebuild their homes. The space station will still operate, and you can also contact Brother Ding through the space station. However, I suggest that the Green Tree tribe does not come to the God Wars Starfield." Actually, everyone understood what he meant. After all, they were not of the same civilization. If different tribes entered rashly, it would bring either trouble or disaster. Hearing this, Ling Yun turned her head to look at Spiritual Sword. Spiritual Sword also had a dejected look. He naturally wanted to follow Junling and the others to take a walk on the Star Ring, take a look, and learn human knowledge. However, Ling Yun said calmly, "This spiritual bird, as an outsider, is willing to stay and help. As the prince of your tribe, I don't need to say more about what you should do, right?" Spiritual Sword sighed. "I know." Junling smiled. "It's okay. We will return to Maka Planet in the future. Everyone will have a chance to meet again." Ling Yun, Spiritual Sword, Nakona, and the others covered their heads and spread their hands. They saluted and thanked them. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the protection of our god." Junling took 2 steps forward and untied his long sword. "I only know now that this Sahua sword belongs to the Green Tree tribe. Now, it can be considered as returning it to its rightful owner." Spiritual Sword took the long sword respectfully. Thank you for your care. This sword has been kept for many years. Lingyun also stepped forward and said, Miss June, thank you for your help and protection along the way. Please accept this gift. It is a small personal gift from me. I hope you can visit us often. She also handed over 3 green tree fruits. These 3 apples were obviously not as round and beautiful as the one in Dingmeng's hand. However, Junling knew that these were good things. They were the blessings of the divine tree that the green tree tribe received when they worshipped the main hall. These fruits helped awaken the psychokinesis of warriors. To her, psychokinesis was a martial technique that could only be encountered by chance. Now that she had received 3 fruits for free, she quickly bowed and thanked her. Thank you, princess. Guang Niao smiled and corrected her. You are the king now. Junling smiled and said, Thank you, king. Dingmeng secretly sighed. If he had not gone underground, he would not have known that he was the same as Junling, Lingyun, and the others. They were all descendants of the Green Tree tribe. It was no wonder that Junling and Lingyun maintained absolute trust in him when they met. The creator was indeed magical. Nikona also stepped forward, holding a handful of brilliant spiritual leaves in her hands. Mr. Dingmeng, thank you for getting rid of the bad guys and avenging my family. These spiritual leaves are what I usually gather, and now I'm giving them to you. I hope you'll keep them and that they'll be of use to you. Dingmeng also knew that these colorful spiritual leaves were bestowed by the tree god to the commoners. They had very good healing and protective effects. With his current strength, he did not need any medicine. However, this young lady from the Green Tree tribe had always been very friendly to him. Therefore, he happily accepted them. Thank you. Kataka waved his hand and said, Let's go. It is most important for us to leave as soon as possible. Chapter 463. When a huge interstellar battleship took off from the ground, it could be seen from the screen that the giant tree in the middle of the forest had recovered quite a bit of its vitality. At the very least, its rotten parts had become relatively normal. It seemed that the super life form was slowly releasing energy underground, restoring the green tree race to what it should be. After the 2 fleets took off, they did not enter the Green Tree space station. Instead, they headed straight for the depths of space. Dingmeng had already asked Kartika. This time, they would fly at normal speed for about 30 days. Their destination was the God's War Star Field's God's War Star Ring. On the mothership, Dingmeng's group of 11 were arranged to rest in a luxurious area. This was the commander's lounge. Other than Fumajin and Shuiyu Mountain, everyone was given a room. Naturally, the room was fully equipped with all kinds of equipment. As a warrior race, Dingmeng's group of 6 would definitely enter the induction cabin to cultivate and learn. Sun Kong and Yang Wei stayed together to study all kinds of information, while Fumajin and Shuiyu Mountain used the energy in the cabin to maintain their artificial bodies. Dingmeng naturally would not waste his precious time. Although he had encountered many enemies along the way from Madison to Green Tree Planet 36, almost none of them could truly threaten him. After all, these 2 places were relatively remote. However, once he entered the God's War Star Field, the situation would be different. It was equivalent to entering the mainstream human society of this star field. Just like the Holy Grail Federation, there would definitely be experts far more powerful than him. Through what he had seen along the way, Dingmeng also realized that the God's War Star Field and the Holy Grail Federation were qualitatively different. The Federation was a more mature human society. The various levels of society were quite distinct, and they were protected by order and laws. There was a balance between the countries. On the other hand, the God's War Star Field was relatively more chaotic. There were all kinds of strange environments everywhere. Therefore, with Dingmeng's cautious and low-key style, he had to strengthen his cultivation. His origin energy would definitely not be able to improve significantly in the short term. Right now, he mainly focused on cultivating telekinesis and techniques. This trip to the Azure Tree Star also allowed Dingmeng to see the increasing importance of telekinesis in actual combat. This was an effect that many martial arts techniques could not replace. In a luxurious cabin, Ding Ming sat cross-legged on the sofa. He took out the greenwood divine fruit that the tree god had given him and looked at it carefully. On the day of the worship ceremony, many treants were so excited that they didn't even take a bite of the apple and directly swallowed it. One could imagine how precious the fruit was. Ding Ming tried to take a bite. He felt that the fruit was a little bitter, but it had a refreshing mint taste. After swallowing the whole fruit, Ding Ming felt that his mind was unusually clear. The energy released by the fruit seemed to be concentrated in his brain, making him feel light and comfortable. Xiao Ai's voice suddenly sounded surprised. Enter the state of meditation. Enter the primary space of consciousness. She must have a deeper meaning for giving such an order. Ding Ming hurriedly followed her instructions. He soon found that his primary space of consciousness had undergone a great change. Originally, his shadow was sitting alone on the reef by the shore, looking at the vast sea and the dark sky. But now, outside the hut by the beach, an azurewood divine tree grew in the open space. The tree wasn't tall and was about the same size as the phantom. However, the tree appeared in the form of light and shadow. In other words, the tree was virtual and not corporeal. Xiao Ai said, "The information flow transmitted to you by the super life form has been saved by the event recorder and entered into my database. It shows that this tree is the cultivation steps and principles." Ding Ming asked curiously, "Telekinesis?" Xiao Ai said, "Yes. The telekinesis you're cultivating now comes from Mao Xing's technique. This should be the technique of the Green Spirit clan. Although there are big differences between the two, their goals are the same. They're both natural and focused on defense. They're suitable for general telekinesis." Ding Ming hesitated. "Is it okay for me to cultivate this?" Xiao Ai sighed. "In fact, I suggest you cultivate this technique. I always feel that Mao Xing's technique is more suitable for warlock experts to cultivate. For example, in the temple, you had a hard time dealing with the Soul Clan." Ding Ming understood what she meant. If he was a telekinesis expert, he wouldn't have to struggle so much when fighting the evil spirit. He could just cast the Terminator technique and get rid of the evil spirit in a few moves. Xiao Ai continued, "This green spirit technique is not a single technique. It's a complete system. Let me explain it to you. You can think of this tree as the core sacred tree in the super forest. When you complete the cultivation of this technique, you'll have the same ability as the sacred tree. Do you still remember the telekinesis force field that shrouded the entire super forest?" Ding Ming not only remembered it, but also had a deep impression of it. Xiao Ai had explained to him that the creator of this force field had surpassed the ranks of primary warlock, intermediate warlock, advanced warlock, super warlock, and warlock master. He had also witnessed the effects of this force field with his own eyes. It could scan the target, analyze its composition, identify its identity, block signals, transform the scenery, open a crack. It could even take an interstellar fleet away in an instant. At that time, he had also calculated that if Ding Ming used the sacred light energy to cultivate, it would take him 150 years to reach that level. Now that he knew the cultivation method, this time would be further shortened. "What should I do?" Ding Ming asked. Xiao Ai said, "Actually, it's similar to the method of constructing the origin. The origin requires origin energy, while the light tree requires telekinesis. You can cast a telekinesis string and try to inject the string into the tree. Remember, you have to start from the roots." Ding Ming took a deep breath and focused his gaze on the roots under the sand. His eyes slowly began to exert force. This feeling was very strange. It was as if organic energy was injected into the light tree, and the tree slowly gained vitality. 5 minutes later, he could see that some of the roots of the tree were no longer in the form of blurry shadows. They were completely clear and bright, and they had truly taken on a physical form. However, only about 7 or 8 of the roots of the tree had undergone this transformation. The rest of the tree remained the same. These 7 or 8 roots were probably less than 1/10 of the tree's roots. As for the big tree on the ground, it was not something that Ding Ming needed to consider at this stage. "That's all." Ding Ming was shocked. Xiao AI was a little dissatisfied. Of course, your telekinesis is considered a relatively powerful ability for origin energy users. However, in the world of warlocks, you're just a beginner warlock. The Azurewood Divine Tree is above the master level. You're at least 12 levels below it. It's not bad that you have this little bit. Ding Ming looked at the light tree and could not help but reveal a bitter smile. So, there's actually such a big gap between me and the Divine Tree. Xiao AI said, I suggest that you use the induction cabin and the nourishment cabin together with the anti-gravity force field to cultivate. This way, you can save as much time as possible. Ding Ming nodded. It was indeed difficult to construct the origin, but cultivating the Azure Spirit technique was even more difficult. This was because only when one's origin energy increased would one's telekinesis increase as well. At this point, telekinesis was like the energy source of a battleship. One had to charge this tree until it was full before one's cultivation was considered complete. This indeed required time to accumulate. It was no wonder that the tree god had advised him to consume the divine fruit when he had enough time. However, Ding Ming's cultivation at this stage was different from before. Because of the divine light bracer, the bracer's modified divine light energy could be used for repeated smelting. Ding Ming could now smelt the same energy 7 times. After these 7 smeltings, the energy was a super energy formed by the combination of origin energy, crystal energy, toxins, divine light energy, and the green organic energy of the inverse source crystal. This was no longer as simple as pure energy. It was completely the essence of the essence. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would never use it. Moreover, with the advancement of his telekinesis technique, the anti-gravity force field's effect had also been strengthened. The fleet's flight time was said to be 1 month, but in Ding Ming's world, half a year had passed in the blink of an eye. The anti-gravity force field's efficiency had increased by an additional 20% from its original 30%. After an unknown amount of time, Ding Ming suddenly exited the space of consciousness. This was because he had sensed that there was someone in the corridor outside his room. After coming out of the induction cabin, Ding Ming opened the door of the room. He did not even need to press the control panel on the coffee table to open the door. His eyes swept across the switch on the panel, and the alloy door automatically opened to 2 sides. Outside the door, Junling walked in with high spirits. She looked very happy. The bark-like orc costume on her body had now been replaced by an exquisite sky blue leather costume. This costume was a bit like a tight suit of armor. Not only did it show off the curves of a woman, but it also gave people a feeling of shrewdness and experience. However, on Junling's body, the fierce and valiant temperament could not be concealed. Ding Ming could not help but look at her a few more times. You can accept this kind of clothes? Junling said, We're about to arrive at the God's War Star Ring. I came here specifically to inform you. This meant that they were about to enter a normal human society. They could no longer live a primitive life like they did on Madison. At the very least, they still had to pay attention to their dress etiquette. Of course, it was still the old saying that women love beauty. To be able to make Ding Ming unable to help but look at her a few more times, this made Junling feel very satisfied. She could not help but smile. Let me show you. After saying that, her eyes fell on the coffee table. A cup on the coffee table suddenly rose out of thin air, flew in a big circle in the air, and then steadily returned to its original position. Not a single drop of the drink in it spilled out. Ding Ming said in surprise, Kinetic telekinesis? Huh, your aura is actually at the combat master level. Junling smiled. I ate the 3 fruits that King Lingyan gave me. The effect is quite good. You're not just good, the effect is heaven-defying. Ding Ming was also a little shocked. It must be known that this girl Junling cultivated in the induction cabin. In a month, she awakened her telekinesis and broke through to the combat master level. Even he did not have such a terrifying speed. This was the legendary talent. Congratulations. Ding Ming was happy from the bottom of his heart. It was a good thing that his friend could make such progress. Junling smiled and said, We've arrived at the God's War Star Ring. Let's go. I've been wanting to take a look for a long time. Chapter 464. The Heavenly War Star Ring. Looking from space, it looked like a huge star whirlpool shining with a sky-blue luster. Beautiful halos slowly spread out in all directions. It was only when they got closer that they realized the magnificence of the star ring. The star ring was composed of 32 rings, with a total diameter of more than 20,000 kilometers. Each ring was a huge starship fortress. Together, they formed this super interstellar city. In fact, it was not accurate to describe it as a city. It was completely an artificial planet. The fleet landed from space as if they were landing on a normal planet. They first entered the atmosphere and then drifted toward the huge spaceport on the ground. This spaceport was the largest spaceport Dingmeng had ever seen. Strictly speaking, it was not an exaggeration to call it a military base. This was the number 23 spaceport of the Long Voyage Alliance. Dingmeng now knew that among the 6 major sects, the Long Voyage Alliance specialized in starship research and development. They were committed to the field of interstellar transportation technology, and so on. They were an indispensable member of the 6 major sects. However, it was precisely because they had many professional and technical personnel and relatively few warriors that their status was not as high as the other 4 sections. This spaceport was exclusively used by the Long Voyage Alliance. It was built on a beautiful grassland with a very open terrain. After the fleet completely landed on the tarmac, the staff waiting on the ground immediately came to greet them. After receiving Katega and his team, they immediately boarded a small transport ship. The transport ship then flew inland. This was the 34th ring on the periphery of the star ring. Its scale was still beyond the imagination of Dingmeng and the others. It was no different from the ground of a planet. Along the way, there were picturesque rivers and mountains. After flying for a while, they finally saw a city where normal humans lived. Dingmeng felt that the layout of this city was actually similar to the layout of Blue Pole Star City. However, the city on the star ring was not as technologically advanced as the Federation. At least here, Dingmeng did not see skyscrapers that were thousands of meters high. Most of the buildings were dozens of stories high. There were also no various kinds of aircraft flying in the sky. After all, this was not a real planet. There were steel fortresses on the ground and underground. It was not easy to form a city here. Although the level of technology here was not as high as the Federation, the city here gave people a sense of security and stability. This was because the Heavenly War Star Ring could also be regarded as a stellar-level superstarship. Even the space-time crack created by the Sacred Tree might not be able to suck this starship away. As for other armed forces that wanted to attack here, it was no different from ants trying to shake a tree. Dingmeng also began to understand why so many people wanted to squeeze into the star ring. The Heavenly War Star Field was full of wars and disasters. Only this place was safe. The space between the star rings was also ingeniously designed. There were no cracks between them. Instead, it was a vast ocean. In other words, the space between the star rings was filled with water. This alone was a huge resource consumption. Dingmeng thought that ordinary silver core stones and crystal energy sources would not be enough to maintain such a huge star ring. It must be a rare resource like superconducting ore. This showed that the Heavenly War Star Ring might not be good in other aspects, but it was definitely first class in terms of energy storage. As the transport ship rapidly advanced towards the inner circle, the cities along the way gradually became more beautiful. The technological level was clearly improving, and one could already see towering skyscrapers and strange constructions. The number of aircrafts in the sky was also increasing. Katega introduced. We are now entering Citrus Grove City in the 10th ring. It is a relatively wealthy city. There are very few residential areas in the first 9 rings. Dingmeng immediately understood. The first ring to the 9th ring must be the core area of the entire star ring. There must be military restricted areas, energy warehouses, and command centers. It was normal that ordinary residential areas were not allowed. However, this Citrus Grove City was still beyond the imagination of Dingmeng and the others. It was a super city floating on the sea. Looking down from the sky, it looked like a tree branch floating on the sea, but looking from the side, it looked like a huge ship. The ship was divided into 3 floors. The upper and middle floors were actually floating in the air. The buildings of various colors were orderly and integrated. The whole city was golden. No wonder it was called Citrus Grove City. It had the scale of a city and a port, but it looked more like a star-level warship. Ding Ming thought to himself that this was probably the core city of the 6 major sections. As he expected, after the transport ship entered the port on the east side, a tall, straight building of 100 floors appeared in front of them. There was a huge helipad at the entrance of the building. The huge crystal projector had already turned into 3 sky blue words in the sky. Long Voyage Alliance. Kataga introduced. This is the Long Voyage Tower of Long Voyage Alliance. It is not a simple building. It is also a multifunctional starship. It is the most outstanding design of our alliance. It was not until the explanation on the way that Ding Meng learned the origin of the Heavenly War Space Zone. This space zone used to be relatively peaceful, but hundreds of years ago, the technology was not very advanced. The sects fought fiercely for resources, and the space pirates and mercenaries were rampant everywhere. The situation here was very chaotic, and the chaos was still going on even today. There were almost no planets that could be inhabited normally. People could only rely on the starships of the major sects for survival. At that time, the biggest sects were the Holy War Army and the Blue Light Group. The Holy War Army had many experts, and the Blue Light Group was very rich. The 2 sects initially relied on a few starships as their fortresses to occupy a place in space. However, the leaders of the 2 sects were very far-sighted. They proposed a joint operation plan, which was to unite the other 4 sects with their own characteristics and form a sect alliance. The 4 sects were the Blood War Temple, which was good at combat, Qian Huan Yu, which was good at various rare fields, the Long Voyage Alliance, which was more advanced in technology, and the Water Cherry Association, which was rich in resources. After the alliance was established, the Long Voyage Alliance proposed the construction of a space ring. With the Holy War Army and the Blue Light Group's fleets as the center, the 6 sects would perform their own duties and constantly build fortresses to expand the space ring. After hundreds of years of development, the Heavenly War Space Ring had not only become the #1 sect, but the Heavenly War Space Ring had also developed into the giant it was today. Almost everyone in the entire space zone yearned to come here. Even the remote Junling on Madison had heard of the name of the space ring for a long time. The Long Voyage Alliance did not have such a large scale in the beginning. At first, it was just a workshop formed by a group of like-minded engineers and mechanical experts. After receiving funding from the Water Cherry Association, it slowly began to develop. During the process of building the space ring, it accumulated a lot of experience and developed energy technologies such as superconducting ores, quasars, and dimensional crystals. Gradually, it became one of the 6 sections. However, as the old saying went, a huge organization like the Long Voyage Alliance could not develop in a single direction. The Long Voyage Alliance placed too much emphasis on technical talents and neglected the martial artists who protected it. Therefore, it did not have much say in many major decisions of the alliance. If it were not for the Water Cherry Association, which was their century-old ally, they would have been suppressed by the other sections. After getting off the spaceship and entering the building, Ding Meng and the others felt as if they were walking into another starship. The building looked like a skyscraper on the outside, but the interior was designed like a starship's cabin. In Kataga's words, the people of the Long Voyage Alliance were basically engaged in scientific research and development. Many of them spent their entire lives in this building and rarely went out. Therefore, they built it according to the standards of a multifunctional starship. The Long Voyage building was a starship, but it had not been used for more than 30 years since its last flight. This place reminded Ding Meng of the Blue Moon branch of the Starbow Group. The strange old man, Cartel, worked in a place like this. However, the people Ding Meng met this time were not like Cartel. In the office hall on the 60th floor of the building, a young and handsome man in a suit and leather shoes received Ding Meng and the others. This man was the vice president of the Long Voyage Alliance, who was in charge of human resources and outreach. The vice president was very polite to Ding Meng and the others. After all, the incident report sent by Kataga mentioned that Ding Meng was on their side instead of messing around with Ji Yin and the others. However, it was difficult for the vice president to make arrangements for this group of people. The reason was very simple. Sun Kong and Yang Wei both had qualifications and were professionals, so it was easy to make arrangements for them. However, the others had neither qualifications nor were they martial artists. The Long Voyage Alliance had never needed martial artists or psionicists, so it was not easy to get them to join. Qualifications was a very important information standard in the God War Star Ring. It was exactly the same as the personal information in the Holy Grail Federation's database. It mainly recorded your identity, specialty, behavior, contribution to the sect you belong to, and especially to the Alliance. Then, it would be evaluated by the Star Ring's mainframe system and finally generate a credit value. This credit value was equivalent to a person's prestige, which was completely digitized. With this credit value, one could get credit points from the God War Star Ring of the 6 major sects, which was equivalent to a salary. It should be known that the God War Star Ring was universal and even recognized by the space pirates. Ding Meng, Jun Ling, and the others all came from Madison, which could not be more remote. Let alone qualifications, the system did not even have their identity information. The vice president smiled at Kataka and said, "Officer Kataka, based on what they have done in the Greenwood Department, they will definitely have no problem entering the Star Ring. They don't need to participate in any competitions outside the Star Ring to obtain qualifications. I can make the decision for you on this point. However, joining our alliance, it's not like you don't know that the professional requirements are quite strict. Since they are psionicists, my suggestion is to take a qualification test. If they pass the test, they will naturally join. If they fail, you can discuss it with the boss and the others. What do you think? After all, these young people are also your friends." Kataka's expression was a little unnatural because his position in the Long Voyage Alliance was relatively high. However, the vice president's insistence on Ding Meng and the others taking the qualification test was a little disrespectful to him. However, what the vice president said made sense. The upper echelons of the Long Voyage Alliance did not pay much attention to warriors. Then, let them take the test. With Ding Meng and the other skills, how could they not pass the test? Ding Meng was also quite curious. It sounded like the test would be very difficult. Your alliance did not pay much attention to combat-type origin ability users, so why would you make the test so difficult? Ding Meng did not care about this. Since he was going to sneak into their organization, how could he not pay a price? Chapter 465. Ding Meng quickly figured out the rules of this aptitude test. Far Voyage Alliance now had more than 120,000 people. Among the 6 major sects, it was the sect with the least number of people. Even ordinary sects had more people than this number. Among the 120,000 people, 110,000 of them were technical talents in the professional field. There were less than 10,000 combat-type origin ability users. These 9,000 plus origin ability users were mostly security guards and starship staff. Only a fleet commander like Kataga was a real combat-type origin ability user. However, Kataga was considered quite powerful among these 9,000 people. The strength of Far Voyage Alliance was indeed a little weak. The test was carried out in the training center on the basement 20 floor. Just the location of this floor showed how little importance Far Voyage Alliance placed on combat-type origin ability users. This so-called training center was completely similar to the dojos in the Norse Empire. It was a spacious metal hall with all kinds of training equipment. There were also a few alloy rings in the distance. There were quite a lot of people in 2s and 3s. Most of them were fighting, but there were also some who were practicing swordsmanship and shooting. Kataga didn't follow because he had been summoned by the higher-ups to attend a meeting. However, the vice president was quite respectful and personally brought the young assistant down. This was the first time Jun Ling and the other 5 had entered a real human society. It was inevitable that everything was new to them. Each of them looked around curiously, seeing the vice president Yu Mingzhi personally appear in the training center. The surrounding origin ability users straightened their backs and greeted him. Yu Mingzhi didn't beat around the bush. He cleared his throat and said, "Everyone, please stop for a moment. These 7 newcomers are here to participate in the test today. Brothers and sisters, please take care of them." The training center was basically filled with all kinds of origin ability users from Far Voyage Alliance. The rules were very simple. If you could exchange blows with them and get their approval, then you would pass. It's that simple? Little Arrow was a little surprised. This isn't simple. The assistant came over and explained in a low voice, "Little brother, these people are very powerful. If you can win against any one of them, then you will pass. They're all all-rounders." "Oh," Little Arrow casually responded. At this moment, the hall was filled with discussions. "There are actually newcomers today. There's going to be fun. Are they here to be abused? Where did this group of people come from? Were they promoted from the arena? What do you think they're dressed like? There's still people wearing animal skin clothing these days. Could it be that they escaped from the slave market?" It was normal for these people to have such thoughts. Before Ding Meng and the rest landed, only Ding Meng, and Qin Qin had changed into slightly cleaner outfits. Elephant, Little Leopard, and Little Arrow were used to being free and unrestrained, so they were still not used to interstellar fashion. Therefore, they were still wearing the outfits they had on Madison, looking like savages. The assistant then asked Little Arrow, "Little brother, what are you good at?" "Good at?" Little Arrow was a little confused. "I'm good at fighting monsters." The crowd immediately burst into laughter. "This brat is actually good at fighting monsters." "What monster? Kill a chicken or steal a cow? You've played too many virtual games. Do you think this is a place to kill monsters and level up?" The assistant also felt that his question was too unprofessional, so he simply changed his tone and said, "All right, what department are you in? Are you good at using weapons?" Little Arrow said, "Me? I should be in the light speed department. I prefer to use a knife." Therefore, a young man immediately walked out from the crowd. "Little brother, what kind of knife are you good at?" "I also use a knife. How about I spar with you?" Little Arrow was about to answer, but he noticed that Junling was winking at him. He immediately understood. This place was the God War Star Ring, not Madison Star. They couldn't fight casually. It was enough to just show some courtesy. Therefore, Little Arrow answered honestly, "You can't." The young man was stunned. "Why?" Little Arrow said, "You're too weak." "You." The young man was annoyed. "Are you looking down on me?" Little Arrow said, "I'm telling the truth." The young man did not argue. He turned his head and said, "Give me a knife." Someone in the crowd immediately handed over a shiny short knife. It was not a sharp weapon, just a thick-bladed short knife used in daily practice. At this time, someone threw a small piece of wood into the air. There was a flash of white light. The wood did not seem to change, but when it landed on the ground, it shattered into 3 pieces. Each piece was almost the same size. This knife was not only fast and accurate, but the technique was also quite ingenious. To be able to break 3 pieces with one knife proved that the young man had good attainments in knife skills. "How is it?" The young man looked pleased. "If you can still show off your skills, I'll consider you recognized." What was the point of cutting wood? Little Arrow really wanted to reply, but now that everyone was competing, he could only say, "Okay, just give me a piece of wood." Someone in the crowd immediately threw a piece of wood. The person who threw it was obviously teasing him, because the wood seemed to be thrown, but in fact, it was bouncing towards Little Arrow's face. Its speed was not slow either. One moment of carelessness, and he would be hit. Dang! It was a loud sound. No one knew what was going on. They saw someone in the crowd fall backward. Taking a closer look, it turned out that the piece of wood had bounced back and hit the person's nose, causing blood to flow out from his nose. This hand strength was indeed the strength used to practice knife skills. Everyone turned their heads to look again and found that the young man's face was a little green. His short knife was now in Little Arrow's hand. Little Arrow held the knife in front of him in a reverse grip. The wood had bounced back when it hit the blade. As for how the knife was snatched away in an instant, not only did the young man not know, he did not react at all. Those who practice knife skills should know how big the gap between the two was. The crowd immediately quieted down. Yu Mingzhi and his assistant were not martial artists. The two of them looked at each other, not knowing how strong Little Arrow was. "You're too weak." The honest person still said this sentence. However, the young man was so ashamed that he could not show his face. He silently retreated. "Isn't this test a little too simple?" Little Arrow still asked the assistant. The assistant was a little dumbfounded. The young man just now was a level 8 spirit weapon user, but he actually cowered without saying anything. This group of people in front of him did have some skills. "Since you're using a knife, let me try." Another big guy walked out from the crowd. Ding Meng sighed. "Forget it, let me do it." He rushed out not because he wanted to be in the limelight, but mainly because Little Arrow and the rest were used to life and death fights on Madison Planet. Once they made a move, it would be fatal. Even though Jun Ling had hinted just now, Little Arrow's counterattack with a knife had knocked that unlucky guy unconscious on the ground. Now that he was being carried out, if it was Elephant and Little Leopard's turn to make a move, he was afraid that someone would die. Ding Meng turned his head to look at Yu Mingzhi. "Director Yu, I'm the weakest in our team. If I can pass, then they can definitely pass too. How about letting me take the test alone? Everyone can just compete. It's not good to make it bloody." Of course, Yu Mingzhi could understand the underlying meaning of these words. This Little Arrow had probably held back just now. If he really counterattacked with all his strength, the result would be unimaginable. And Ding Meng's appearance could easily create a false impression for everyone. Ding Meng's appearance was not shocking. His stature was short, and he looked a little thin and weak. He might really be the weakest in this group. The big guy stared at Ding Meng. "You also use a knife?" Ding Meng said indifferently. "If you're also chopping wood, then there's no need." The big guy looked at him for a while and said, "Okay, you have guts. Let's not play those fancy games. Are you interested in competing?" Ding Meng said, "How do you want to compete?" The big guy pointed to a machine in the distance and said, "Let's try this." "How about it?" Ding Meng had seen this machine before. It was a training platform for cold weapons. It looked like a windmill, but there were all kinds of scabbards and scabbards hanging on the windmill. It spun in a disorderly manner. It required one to insert a weapon of the same type into the corresponding scabbards. Then, the platform above the platform would evaluate one's score. This test looked simple, but it was actually very difficult. For a master knife user, not only did it require one to be skillful, fast, and strong, it also required one to have a good grasp of timing. There were at least 30 scabbards hanging on the platform. Once the machine was started, the speed of the platform's rotation was not inferior to that of a wheel. It was so dazzling that it was difficult to see clearly, let alone insert the scabbards. The assistant gave Ding Meng and the big guy each a short knife. The big guy stood in front of the windmill and stared at the pile of scabbards that were spinning in a mess. Suddenly, he shouted and threw the knife out. With a click, one could tell that he had accurately inserted the knife into the scabbards. Sure enough, the platform immediately stopped spinning, and the electronic screen above quickly showed the score. 1608 points. Beautiful. That was a really beautiful strike. Damn, it can't be, right? He actually broke through 1,500 points with one strike. Third brother is still the best. Even Four-Eyed can't reach your score. The crowd immediately burst into an uproar. It was obvious that this strike was of a high standard. Ding Meng was actually quite impressed. To be able to get 1,000 points with this kind of cold weapon rotating platform was already quite good. It was impossible to get 1,500 points without 8 to 10 years of hard work. This was because it was purely a combination of strength, speed, direction, and timing. It didn't require one to use origin energy. The big guy also looked at Ding Meng with a smug expression. "Kid, I won't say that you can surpass me. If you can get 1,500 points, I'll acknowledge you." He had his reasons for choosing this competition. Xiao Jin's flick just now was skillful, but his eyesight and strength might not be as good as his. Thus, he chose the rotating platform to determine who was better. Ding Meng smiled and said, You might not acknowledge me. The big guy also smiled. What? Did 1,600 points scare you? You're wrong. Ding Ming turned his head and said to his assistant, Can you give me a few more knives? Everyone looked at each other. What was the meaning of this? Could it be that if he couldn't succeed the first time, he would have to try a few more times to succeed? The assistant quickly handed over the knives. There were a total of 3 knives, and each knife was different in shape and size. In other words, Ding Ming now had 4 different short knives. Ding Ming smiled at the big guy and said, I'm not scared. I'm just scared that I'll scare you. Chapter 466. The rotating platform started to spin again. This time, it was obvious that someone was playing tricks behind the scenes. The rotating speed was much faster than before, and all the scabbards were spinning so fast that they almost turned into a disc. Ding Ming did not even look at the rotating platform. He opened his left palm and tossed the 4 scabbards into the air. Then his right index finger quickly tapped 4 times in the air. With a click, the 4 scabbards actually stopped the rotating machine at the same time. It was obvious that all 4 scabbards had hit the mark. However, when everyone took a closer look, the electronic screen showed a merciless score, 22,450 points. The big man's smile instantly froze. His mouth slowly opened into an O shape. The surrounding people were also dumbfounded. What the F***CK was going on? With 22,000 points, the average score for each slash was more than 5,000 points. Compared to 5,000 points, 1,600 points was really nothing. Those who knew martial arts would know that this was no longer a difference in points, but a difference of at least 4 great realms in martial arts. The big man stood there, dumbfounded. The highest record of the Long Voyage League was 3,989 points per scabbard. However, not only did the person in front of him score 5,500 points per scabbard, he even used 4 scabbards at the same time. The most infuriating thing was that he used his fingers to flick the scabbards. He did not even look at the direction. Do you still want me to live? The big man came to his senses and was about to approach Ding Ming. However, someone else walked out from the crowd and looked at Ding Ming with contempt. These are all children's games. Are you interested in playing something more aggressive? This person was also tall and strong. He was wearing a set of training clothes. When he walked out, the people on both sides automatically made way for him. It seemed that he was one of the more powerful people in this place. Ding Ming slightly sensed that this big man in training clothes should be a war venerable from the thermodynamics department. What kind of aggressive? Ding Ming asked. The man in training clothes proudly pointed not far away. Try this one. Ding Ming looked in the direction of his finger and saw a row of punching machines in the corner of the west wall. He had seen this type of punching machine before. It was the same type of machine that he had seen in the Listen Academy. It was similar to a treadmill. A person stood on the treadmill and faced a leather target directly in front of him. The design of this machine was relatively simple, and it was usually used by beginners. Logically speaking, with the reputation of the 6 major sects, the equipment they usually used shouldn't be so shabby. Presumably, the Long Voyage Alliance concentrated all their resources on research and development, and didn't invest much in the cultivation of origin ability users. We are all psionicists, and this place is too narrow. Using psionic energy will easily affect the surroundings. Let's stick to the old rules. What do you think of pure strength? Ding Ming nodded. That's true. He stretched out his hand and said, All right, I'll let you have it. You're a guest, so you go first. Ding Ming waved his hand and said, No, you go first. The guest will follow the host. The man in training clothes was secretly delighted. This kid was a bit naive and didn't understand the routine. If he let him go first, he would definitely not be able to surpass him. He slowly walked onto the machine and stood in place, not in a hurry to make a move. However, those who were observant could see that the veins on his arm were already bulging. Obviously, he was secretly accumulating strength. A moment later, the man in training clothes suddenly took a lunge and threw a straight punch with a bang. Ding, 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 ding. The score counter under the target rang for a full 10 seconds before it stopped. The punch produced a complete score of 20,000 points. The people around began to cheer again, but Ding Meng frowned. The man in training clothes didn't show any complacency. He said very calmly, "If your punch can surpass my strength, then I lose." Ding Meng sighed. "I can't." Everyone was stunned. They didn't understand why this kid was scared this time. Actually, others didn't know the trick behind this, but Ding Meng was very clear about it. This kind of machine was usually used by students to practice. Because the students were all origin ability users, the degree of body tempering was still in the early stages. How could there be any explosive force with just the strength of their hands? Therefore, the highest score that the bullskin target could bear was around 20,000 points. In other words, the impact force of a single punch was around 40,000 pounds. What kind of concept was this? Even the large devouring monsters on planet Madison would be sent flying dozens of meters away by this punch. Moreover, it was the kind of punch that could seriously injure them. Thinking back to when Ding Meng was in the dojo of the Norse Empire, he could only get around 400 points after using his origin ability, just by relying on pure strength. A beginner war elder was exactly this score. In other words, the training clothes could already give the highest score. If he used more strength, the machine would malfunction. However, the training clothes were also praiseworthy. To be able to get such a high score with pure strength and to be able to accurately control it to 20,000, this was especially commendable. At the very least, it showed that Ding Meng's fist and strength were real. However, now that Ding Meng had admitted defeat, the training clothes couldn't keep his cool anymore. He said proudly, "It's not bad that you can see the difference between us. After all, our long voyage alliance is one of the 6 major sections. If you want to join us, you must have strength. Do you understand? Strength." Seeing his serious look, Ding Meng couldn't help but laugh. "Don't be happy too early. I just admit that I can't surpass you in terms of points, but that doesn't mean that I don't have strength." The training clothes also laughed. "Hee, then please take it out for me to see." Ding Meng laughed and said, "If this is called strength, then your punch just now can only be called child's play." After saying that, he punched out in the air. He was standing at least 10 meters away from the machine, but as soon as he punched out, there was a whoosh sound. Everyone present felt a large invisible force surging out of Ding Meng's fist. This force hit the target, and the scoreboard kept ringing. The score instantly soared to 20,998. However, when it soared to 21,000, the whole machine suddenly flew out and hit the steel wall on the west side like a cannonball. With a boom, it turned into a cloud of dust. For a moment, the hall was completely silent. If the previous 2 matches were just fancy child's play, then this time was the real deal. Not only did this punch surpass 20,000 points, it even turned the machine into dust. Moreover, it was using a familiar formula. The most infuriating thing was that he had hit a cow through a mountain. If this punch really landed on a person, no one present would be able to withstand it. Who would dare to believe that he was the weakest person in the crowd? The crowd was extremely quiet. They all looked at each other, wondering who else wanted to go up. However, the training clothes cried out in surprise, "No, you cheated. You cheated. You used spiritual energy." Ding Meng couldn't be bothered to argue. Did he use his origin energy or not? Could it be that he didn't know? Or perhaps, did he think that these origin energy users were all idiots? That they didn't have any sensory abilities? "Shut up." A dignified voice came from the door. A white-haired old man slowly walked in. This person was wearing a work suit, but his aura wasn't weak. Based on initial judgment, he should be an intermediate combat master. The old man walked forward and glared at the training clothes. You can't even distinguish the tremor force, cannon force, and penetration force of others. What have you been practicing all day? Hurry up and get out. Don't make a fool of yourself here. After the old man reprimanded him, the training clothes immediately returned to the crowd dejectedly. The old man walked in front of Ding Meng and took the initiative to reach out his hand. "Hello, little brother. I'm Bai Hao, the person in charge of the security department here." Ding Meng shook his hand and said, "Hello, Ding Meng." Bai Hao turned his head to look at Yu Mingzhi. "Director Yu, there's no need to test them. I want this group of young people." Yu Mingzhi was a bit hesitant. "Old Bai, Do you mean that Brother Ding and the others passed the test? Baihao's face revealed a sly smile. Director Yu, it's a blessing for our alliance that a talent like Brother Ding is willing to join our long voyage alliance. Oh, Yu Mingzhi was a bit surprised. When he saw Ding Meng's performance just now, he also knew that Ding Meng was powerful. But Ding Meng and the others were really too young. In his mind, young people in their 20s and 30s were limited no matter how powerful they were. Baihao looked at Ding Meng again and said with a smile, "How old are you, Brother Ding?" Ding Meng said 25. Baihao showed a trace of envy. "You're so young. I admire you." Ding Meng said, "I don't dare." Baihao said, "Don't worry, Brother Ding. I can make the decision for the director and the others. You are now an official member of our Long Voyage Alliance. Whoever is not convinced can stand out. There must be someone who is not happy." The training clothes whispered, "He's just a little good at punching." Baihao glared at him again. "You are really ignorant and fearless. Each of you thinks that you have some skills. You can't even tell that you're a master. What a waste of your eyes." The training clothes argued, "If you have the ability, let's fight in the arena. It's nothing to beat a machine to earn points." Baihao was too lazy to pay attention to him. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone stand back." When he said that, the crowd immediately stepped back more than 20 meters. It seemed that Baihao was going to fight in person. Baihao said, "If I'm not wrong, Brother Ding is from the Department of Thermodynamics, right?" Ding Meng nodded and said, "Elder, you have a good eye." Baihao clenched the joints on his fist and said with a smile, "I'm just excited to see Brother Ding and can't help but want to test your strength. But my old bones can't stand the torment, so I can only fight with Brother Ding." Ding Meng politely stretched out his hand. "Elder, please." Although he said please, he also secretly braced himself. This Baihao's strength should not be at the level of an intermediate combat master. This was because Baihao had slightly activated a trace of origin energy, which raised his aura to the level of a beginner combat warrior. However, this aura was very heavy and vigorous. It was enough to show that the old man's basic skills were very solid when he was young. Sure enough, Baihao suddenly flipped his hand and threw a smash fist across the air. Similarly, a ferocious fist wind smashed toward Ding Meng. Ding Meng did not move. He allowed the fist wind to sweep across his body. His body only trembled slightly, and then his right palm quickly spread out toward the ground. With a loud boom, a piece of alloy steel on the ground was directly blown out of shape. It was like a piece of tofu on the ground that had been stepped on. The old man in the training clothes was originally a bit unconvinced, but when he saw the scene in front of him, his face suddenly turned white. He was not ashamed, but he was truly frightened. Not only was he frightened, but the surrounding crowd was also frightened. Elder Bai's punch had used his origin energy to create a strong wind. However, Ding Meng did not counterattack. He used his body to receive the attack head-on. Then, he guided the force into his arm and finally into the ground. Thus, this kind of effect was created. If he dared to play like this, then it meant one thing. This Ding Meng's strength was probably not below Elder Bai's. Elder Bai was a level 9 spirit martial realm expert. Could this Ding Meng be a spirit general? Chapter 467. Baihao stopped after one punch. He looked at Ding Meng with a hint of admiration. Brother Ding is not only powerful, but also humble and steady. I haven't seen a young talent like Brother Ding for many years. What he really admired was not Ding Meng's strength, but Ding Meng's demeanor. Young people nowadays like to show off. As long as they had a little bit of strength, they would want to show it to the world. However, Ding Meng did not do so. Once he punched, Ding Meng took Ding Meng's punch, which meant that Ding Meng respected him as an elder. Therefore, Ding Meng did not fight back directly. He did not embarrass Baihao, nor did he embarrass himself. It could be seen that Ding Meng was usually very low-key. A 25-year-old spirit general came all the way here to join the Long Voyage Alliance. Yet Yu Mingzhi still wanted to test him. You guys are really a bunch of blind people. Baihao thought in his heart, but he definitely wouldn't say it out loud. He just turned his head and glanced at the training clothes. I'm afraid you don't have the qualifications to compete with him. The exercise clothes were now convinced. Yes, yes. Elder Bai is right. Bai Hao said, everyone disperse. Do what you need to do. He looked at Yu Mingzhi again. President Yu, do you have any questions now? Yu Mingzhi laughed and said, welcome to our big family, Brother Ding. He did not know martial arts, but he was not stupid. There were less than 2 people in the entire Long Voyage Alliance who could take Elder Bai's punch without getting hurt. If this kind of talent was not kept and taken in by other sects, the bosses would probably hammer his eyes blind. The key was that Ding Ming was young and had unlimited room for growth. This was his capital. Bai Hao said, Brother Ding, come to my office for a chat. His office was in a simple small room on the south side of the hall. It was about 20 square meters in size. There were simply tables, chairs, sofas, and other facilities. It did not even have 3 cabins, which was really shabby. However, this environment was very good for Ding Ming and the others, especially Elephant and Leopard. They had never sat on a velvet sofa before. It was not until everyone was seated that Bai Hao murmured, I also received a notice from Commander Kataga, so I made a special trip back to meet you. If it weren't for the matter of Greenwood Department, I don't think Brother Ding and you would have joined us. The Long Voyage Alliance really invests little in cultivation. Jun Ling asked curiously, but old mister, you've always stayed in the Long Voyage Alliance. Bai Hao smiled and shook his head. Miss Xiao Jun, you don't understand. I'm 189 years old this year, and that's about it. I'm just waiting to retire here. The world now belongs to you young people. Jun Ling understood this logic. After cultivating for close to 200 years, he was still at the combat master level and had yet to break through to the warlord level. This kind of aptitude could only be considered average. There was not much point in continuing to cultivate. Bai Hao then explained, actually, I only returned after receiving a notice from the higher-ups. Coincidentally, I bumped into you guys and decided to pass this matter to you guys. Ding Ming asked, what is it? Bai Hao said, the Alliance is running a project recently. I don't know the specifics of the project, but they want to recruit a group of people from the 6 major sections. I suggest you guys give it a try. This kind of recruitment opportunity often appeared within the Holy War Alliance. Usually, it was some special or tricky tasks. After completing it, one could increase their qualifications and get extra rewards. However, this kind of task generally had nothing to do with the Long Voyage Alliance. There were too few warriors in the Long Voyage Alliance. For example, the guy in the exercise suit and the burly man just now thought that they were talents and insisted on participating. As a result, they were rejected. Instead of increasing their qualifications, they had to pay a lot of money. Of course, Ding Ming was generally not interested in these tasks, but Jun Ling and the others were very interested. They were new here and were curious about everything new. Ding Ming explained calmly, actually, it's just like when you were on Madison. You go out to hunt, bring back the skeletons you get, and sell them to the professor. The professor will make equipment for you. It's that simple. Bai Hao said, but this time it's not simple. The Alliance needs to go through a selection process first. The person in charge of this project is Lin Aoshue of the Water Cherry Society. Ding Ming frowned and said, who is Lin Aoshue? Well, you'll find out later. Bai Hao was a little helpless. After all, Ding Ming and the others were outsiders and did not know the specific situation of the 6 major sections. Anyway, you just need to know that Lin Aoshue is one of the bosses of the Water Cherry Society. That's enough, right? Ding Ming immediately understood. Since the boss of a sect was personally in charge of this matter, why would there be a selection process? It was probably a big deal. Bai Hao continued, our alliance has never had many people participate in this kind of activity. However, the Water Cherry Society is our ally, so it's unreasonable for us to not send anyone. At least, we have to send someone to the selection process, right? As for whether or not they can be selected, that's not important. This was the Long Voyage Alliance. They had to give face to the Water Cherry Society. In any case, the boss of the Water Cherry Society was personally taking part. Could it be that they could not even send a small fry? Ding Ming said, all right, then let's go and give it a try. Bai Hao smiled and said, with your strength, it shouldn't be a problem. Ding Ming said, Then where should we go to apply? Bai Hao said, "This matter has been assigned to me. I'll send the name list of the 7 of you to the mainframe right now. When the time comes, the Water Cherry Society will send someone to pick you up." As he spoke, he turned on his personal AI on the table and prepared to enter the name list. It was fine if he did not turn on the AI, but once he turned on Xiao AI, she could read the information in the AI. Xiao AI's copying ability was definitely not as good as Little Rascal's, but it was not a problem for her to hack into the system and read some basic information. In just 30 seconds, Ding Ming had a general understanding of the Water Cherry Society. This sect controlled an extremely abundant amount of energy. The main system of Planet Divinity's mainframe was supplied by the Water Cherry Society. The Water Cherry Society had more than 500,000 members, far more than the Long Voyage Alliance. Of course, it still could not compare to the top 4 sections. The Water Cherry Society also faced the same development problem as the Long Void Alliance. As Planet Divinity's mainframe continued to expand, an energy crisis could occur at any time. Thus, the Water Cherry Society had focused on energy research and development in recent decades, constantly sending out fleets to explore and mine, transporting back large amounts of precious resources. The reason why the sect ranked at the bottom wasn't because they didn't value martial artists, but because the majority of the Water Cherry Society's members were women. Out of the 500,000 members, 430,000 were women. The main reason was that the Water Cherry Society's upper echelon was made up of 5 women. Once women banded together, they would naturally reject the opposite sex. By the same logic, the Holy War Army and the Blue Light Group also had their own opinions about the Water Cherry Society. Their opinions were a common problem for men. What could a bunch of women accomplish? The Water Cherry Society did not participate in any long-distance missions or large-scale military operations. This made the Holy War Army and Blood War Hall, who had always revered strength, feel a little disdainful. These women were indeed timid and afraid of death. In the end, they still had to rely on the men when it mattered. Every time the Water Cherry Society held an event or celebration, they would always come up with new tricks. However, no matter how much the top sex complained, they could not do anything about this group of women because they controlled Planet Divinity's most important energy source. If they could cooperate, they would cooperate as much as possible. However, this was all superficial information. Putting aside the factors of sex and development, the bachelors and widows of the other 5 sects all secretly yearned for the Water Cherry Society because there were so many beautiful women there. It was a man's paradise. The God War Starfield was similar to the Holy Grail Federation in this regard. They did not advocate monogamy, nor did they explicitly oppose polygamy. As long as you had the strength, having a group of wives was not a problem. As long as you had the charm, having a group of husbands was a piece of cake. In this day and age, the rich would eventually get married, while the poor would witness it with their own eyes. Of course, Ding Meng's interest was definitely not in these aspects. His goal was very clear: starships and energy sources. Since the Water Cherry Society was known as an energy sect, he would go and take a look. It would be best if he could find something useful. The Water Cherry Society was far more efficient than everyone imagined. As soon as Bai Hao uploaded the list, it took less than 2 hours for the Water Cherry Society's reception spaceship to arrive at the plaza of the long-distance building. This was also a small transport spaceship. The person who walked out of the spaceship was indeed a beautiful woman, and a natural one at that. The beautiful woman took the initiative to introduce herself. "Hello, you must be Mr. Ding Meng. Nice to meet you. I'm AI Lu from the Water Cherry Society's General Affairs Department in Jizhou City. You can call me Lulu. I'm responsible for your itinerary. It's an honor to be able to serve our ally on this mission." AI Lu was even taller than Ding Meng, and she looked to be around 35 years old. Although she was also young, it sounded awkward to call her Lu, so Ding Meng could only shake her hand humbly. "Hello, Sister Lu. We were asked by the Long Distance Alliance to participate in your recruitment. Sorry to trouble you along the way." "It's no trouble at all." AI made a friendly gesture. "Everyone, let's get on the spaceship first. The recruitment location is still in the inner ring, so we still need to fly for a while. That made sense. Ding Ming thought to himself that he could only see the real situation of the God Wars planet ring within the 10th ring. A sect like the Water Cherry Society should be within the 10th ring as well. However, as soon as the spaceship took off and everyone sat down in the lounge, Ding Ming saw how unpredictable the Water Cherry Society was. AI Lu seemed to be very happy to be able to receive Ding Ming and his group. She said with a smile, "Mr. Ting, Miss June, we'd like to attend the banquet arranged by President Lin to show our support for this event." Ding Ming was a bit confused. Weren't they going to participate in the selection process? How did it suddenly become a banquet? AI Lu smiled and explained, "Because the 5 major sects have sent many famous people to participate in this event, our Water Cherry Society should receive them with high standards." Ding Ming thought to himself that they weren't famous people, right? Ayla didn't seem to notice this problem. She continued to smile and said, "So, I'd like to make a friendly suggestion. Mr. Ting, can you change your attire?" Chapter 468. Ding Ming could understand the problem of changing clothes. After all, this was a high-class banquet held by the 6 great system-allocated sections. It was not good to dress up in an unconventional manner, especially Elephant's clothes. They were really horrible to look at. Her lower body was a grass skirt, and her furry thighs were exposed. She looked as if she had been painted with a layer of black dye. Junior Leopard and Little Arrow were not much better. They looked as if they had rolled around in the mud. Therefore, under AI Lee's arrangement, the group of people took a bath first. AI Lu and a few staff members personally trimmed the hair of Ding Ming and the other savages, shaved their beards, and gave them a pair of suits and leather shoes. Unfortunately, Elephant and the other savages had never worn a suit before and did not know how to tie a tie. Therefore, Ding Ming helped Elephant and Junior Leopard, while AI Lu personally helped Little Arrow. Little Arrow had never been so close to a beautiful woman's face. Their faces were less than a meter apart, and they could hear each other's breathing clearly. Little Arrow was so nervous that his whole body stiffened. Big drops of sweat fell from his head, making Junling and Qin laugh. This guy killed people without blinking, but he was actually scared of beautiful women. After Junling finished laughing, it was Little Arrow's turn to laugh at them. AI Lu had provided 2 red dresses. These dresses had 2 distinct features. Once Junling and Qin put them on, their backs would be completely exposed, and more than half of their breasts would be exposed. Junling and Qin refused to wear them no matter what. In the end, they would not wear them no matter what. AI Lu had no choice but to find 2 sets of women's long-sleeved suits for them. But this was not enough. According to the requirements of the Water Cherry Society, AI Lu had to help Junling and Qin put on makeup. It was said that people relied on clothes, but women not only relied on clothes, but also on makeup. Anyway, Ding Ming and Qin did not know how to do makeup. They only saw AI Lu bring in a lot of boxes and use a small pen to paint and draw on their faces. The whole process took 2 hours. After putting on makeup, Junling and Qin seemed to have changed into another person. Qin was like a gentle and lovely daughter of a humble family, while Junling was like a capable white-collar beauty. At the very least, the aggressive and beastly temperament on their bodies was suppressed by the powerful makeup skills. People who didn't know would really not be able to see the clues of this group of people. AI Lu even prepared to do some makeup for Ding Ming and Qin, but Ding Ming and Qin refused. They definitely did not have the patience to sit there and let others paint and draw on their faces. After flying for another half an hour, the transport ship arrived at their destination. What appeared in front of Ding Ming's eyes was an exact replica of the Meteor City. This was a vast ocean, and in the middle of the enchanting blue ocean, an island was like a pearl embedded in the mysterious depths of the ocean. The scenery of the island was picturesque, with continuous green mountains and winding rivers intertwined together. It was as enchanting as a fairyland. On the lawn not far from the beach, exquisite and elegant villas rose from the ground. At this moment, Night was about to fall, and the villa area was brightly lit with people. This place felt like a holiday resort. As expected, AI Lu explained, this is one of the leisure camps of our water cherry society. It is also the place where the welcoming ceremony will be held. Ding Meng and the others all noticed that various spaceships in the sky were constantly landing on the apron by the beach. There were as many as 20 aprons, each of which could carry a medium-sized starship. It was clear that there were many people who came to apply for the recruitment this time. In front of the apron area was a very elegantly built square, which was in the style of a flower fence. The welcoming team of the Water Cherry Society stood in a row at the gate. This group of people were all gorgeously dressed beauties, wearing sky-blue short skirts and waving flowers. As long as a guest arrived, all the beauties would bow in unison and say, "Welcome to the Water Cherry Society." Junior Leopard and Little Arrow had never seen such a scene before, and their eyes were fixed on the beautiful women. The pairs of white and tender legs under the short skirts were really too eye-catching, and the smiles of the beauties were also quite charming and moving. Even Ding Meng felt that it was too eye-catching. In his view, this place was almost full of women, and they were all kinds of beauties. There were so many that it was almost too much to take in, and so many that it was almost tiring. Although he had experienced similar occasions in the Holy Grail Federation, he had never seen such a large group of beauties like this one. After entering the square, one could choose a place to sit. The layout of this place had taken the characteristics of each of the 6 major sects into consideration. Therefore, there were not only long tables suitable for a gathering of many people, but also exquisite and elegant booths. There were also portable round tables for people to enjoy the scenery. Anyway, Ding Meng had seen some of these places before, and there were also some that he had never seen before. There were many seats, but they were not messy, and there was even a faint sense of order. It was obvious that the Water Cherry Society had put in a lot of effort in welcoming guests. Ding Meng glanced around again and estimated that there were tens of thousands of guests in the square. For a moment, he was a little interested. What kind of recruitment event was this that it could attract so many people? At this time, AI Lu took the initiative to ask, "Mr. Ting, may I ask where we should sit?" This. Ding Meng also felt a little embarrassed. This place was a bit like the last time she attended the Lang family's banquet in Blue Pole Star City. At that time, there were men and women dressed in luxurious clothes and holding wine glasses everywhere, chatting and laughing in groups of 2s and 3s. Unfortunately, Ding Meng didn't know any of them. In that case, she would have to find an inconspicuous place. "Is there anything to eat?" Ding Meng asked. Of course. Aila was obviously very smart. He immediately guessed Ding Meng's thoughts. "I suggest that we have some tea and snacks first, because it's not time for the formal banquet yet." Ding Meng chose a remote place near the beach at the edge of the square. There was a small slope here, and on the slope was a big barbecue rack. Tea and snacks were definitely out of the question. Barbecue was his true love. AI Lu was indeed very considerate. He asked the waiter to bring the ingredients, such as spicy chicken thighs, spicy roasted wings, and big pig trotters, and they were all roasted on the rack. The aroma made Junior Leopard and the others drool. "What's this thing?" Junior Leopard picked up a can. "Idiot, this is beer." Little Arrow was a little speechless. "You only know how to learn. Don't you know how to learn more about life?" Junior Leopard opened the can and took a sip. He smacked his lips and said, "It's not very good. It's a bit bland." "Really? Let me try it." Little Arrow also picked up a can of beer and swallowed it in a few mouthfuls. He smacked his lips and said, "It's really not good. It's very bland." Elephant was puzzled. "How can beer be bad? It's not good." Junior Leopard raised his head and gulped down a can. The expression on his face was very honest. "It's really not good." Little Arrow took out another can from the box and said, "Elephant, you don't have to drink it. We'll drink the bad ones. You can eat the meat later." "Yes." Junior Leopard also took out a can and opened it quickly. "Give the good ones to Big Brother, and Sister June, leave the bad ones to us." The two of them said that the beer tasted bad, but they drank dozens of cans in one go. Elephant couldn't hold it in anymore. He kicked the two of them away and hugged the remaining half of the box in his arms. However, once the barbecue started, these people couldn't control themselves at all. They started to eat and drink. Even Jun Ling and Qin Xin didn't care about their image and directly ate to their heart's content. As for Ding Ming, he couldn't win against this group of savages at all. This was because Elephant even ate raw meat on Madison Planet. When the barbecue was half done, Junior Leopard and Little Arrow scooped it up. For a moment, this group of people was in a mess. Of course, eating and drinking like this would inevitably attract some people's attention. However, the people who came today were all conceited people with status. They left after casting a disdainful look. However, Elephant and the others couldn't stop eating and drinking. Everyone was trying their best to survive in a bloody storm. How could they not eat to their heart's content once they got the chance to eat for free? After eating and drinking for a while, Elephant and the other two men finally stopped for a short while. Ding Ming finally got the chance to eat. It was also at this moment that someone finally couldn't stand their nonsense and took the initiative to come over. The person who came was a tall and thin man with glasses. He looked gentle, but his words were very rude. "Hey, which family are you from? How can you eat and drink without caring about the occasion?" Jun Ling turned her head and glanced at him. She didn't care about him at all. Her thoughts were the same as Ding Ming's. This person is not a threat. Don't worry about him. Let's continue eating. However, this glance annoyed the man with glasses. "I'm asking you a question. Why are you so arrogant? Do you know who I am?" Jun Ling still didn't answer. Her mouth didn't have time to speak. Ding Ming and the others didn't even raise their heads. Their mouths were full of oil. The man with glasses was completely annoyed. He stepped forward and suddenly kicked the barbecue rack away. This kick really scared everyone because this person wasn't even an origin ability user. Ding Ming and the others never thought that he would dare to make a move. Seeing the big pile of meat skewers being sent flying, Jun Ling bounced up like a rabbit and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" The man with glasses said arrogantly, "Why don't you listen when I'm talking nicely? You only listen when I make a move?" What answered him was a slap in the face. He only heard a paw sound. How did the barbecue rack fly? The bespectacled man also flew up in the same way. As for how Jun Ling did it, he absolutely couldn't see it clearly. Jun Ling still had a sense of propriety. The man with glasses rolled on the ground a few times. When he got up, his glasses were gone and his nose was bleeding. He shouted in exasperation, "Bastards, you dare to make a move in this place? You're courting death." Still, no one answered him. Jun Ling looked at the meat skewers on the ground and frowned. What a pity. It was almost done. At this time, the people in the booth opposite all left their seats. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 origin ability users surrounded Ding Ming and the others. These people's auras weren't weak. They were all dressed in leather armor. Each one of them stared coldly at Jun Ling. It looked like they were ready to make a move at any time. Jun Ling's gaze finally became cold and fierce. Still looking for trouble? In the crowd, an elegant man in a suit separated the crowd and walked forward arrogantly. "Miss, you're breaking the rules a little by starting a fight." Jun Ling said, "You don't have eyes." The man in the suit's face suddenly sank. "What do you mean?" Jun Ling said coldly. "Can't you see who started it first?" Chapter 469. The man in the suit said indifferently, "I only saw my people talking to you nicely, but you sent them flying with a slap." Jun Ling had never been good with words. When she saw that this person was distorting the truth, she slowly put down the bamboo skewer in her hand. A cold glint flashed in her beautiful eyes, and an aggressive, beastly aura was immediately produced like a blade. The man in the suit obviously felt it and couldn't help but retreat a few steps. His tone was a little surprised. "What do you want to do?" Jun Ling pointed at the barbecue grill on the ground and asked coldly, "I'll ask you one thing. Who kicked this grill over?" The man in glasses rushed forward this time, his face full of arrogance. "So what if I kicked it? Our group is in." He didn't finish his sentence before his whole person seemed to be under a spell. An invisible fist hit him in the face, and he flew into the air again. Junling's kinetic telekinesis was still very weak, but against ordinary people, it was like a butcher's knife. The man in glasses fell to the ground this time and couldn't get up because his whole face was deformed. He had to thank Junling for being merciful. With Junling's current strength, she could blow him to death with a breath. What big dog guts, daring to make a move here. The man in the suit's face changed. He waved his hand decisively and said, "Go." As soon as the voice fell, more than 10 Origin ability users immediately swarmed up, and then there was no then. They only saw Junling's afterimage flash a few times in the crowd. In less than 2 seconds, more than 10 people were all lying on the ground screaming. The man in the suit's face turned pale. He never dreamed that this white-collared beauty would have such good skills. He couldn't see Junling's technique and movements at all. Junling had made rapid progress recently. She had basically learned Ding Meng's hand knife to the best of her abilities. Furthermore, she had improved on the basis of the hand knife. That was, she had quickly turned her palm into an elbow. This kind of quick and short combat was very effective in a group fight. She combined her palm and elbow with her body movements. These dozen people were like targets. Everyone's shoulder bones were cut off by the hand knife, and their cheekbones were smashed by the elbow. The man in the suit retreated step by step, his face full of horror. "You!" Junling's figure flashed again. He suddenly flashed to the man's flank, and with a backhand, the man in the suit couldn't resist at all. He staggered forward for a distance, and then fell on the grass, right next to the barbecue grill. Before he could react, the elephant and leopard on both sides reached out and pinned him to the ground. If this had happened in the past, the man in the suit would have been dismembered. However, during the past few months of training on the starship, everyone had learned a lot about normal human society through the photon computer. They knew that they couldn't simply yell and kill after entering Celestial Ring, so they went easy on them. However, in the eyes of Junling and the others, it was a great humiliation to the man in the suit because his hair was grabbed by Little Arrow and his head was lifted up. Little Arrow sneered and said, "My big sister is asking you a question. Did your people kick this shelf over?" The man in the suit was stubborn enough. He cursed, "So what if I am? Just you wait if you have the guts. You dare to be stubborn with such strength." Little Arrow rubbed his head against the ground. "You want to eat meat skewers? No way. Eat some soil to wake you up." The man in the suit lay on the grass and struggled for a while. Junling frowned and said, "What a bummer. Throw this guy out." The poor man in the suit couldn't move because of the 3 savages. Then the 3 lifted him up and threw him out. He rolled on the ground a few times like the man in glasses. "Don't run if you have the guts. Just you wait. You're courting death." The man in the suit ran deep into the square. Ayla didn't say anything. She just stood there in a daze. She was completely dumbfounded. She originally thought that these people from Long Voyage Alliance were ordinary staff. She didn't expect them to be so fierce that they even beat up the man in the suit. Ding Meng suddenly said, "Which sector are these people from?" Ayla came to her senses. They're from Blue Light Group. The man in the suit is Mr. Wuji. He's a manager of their group's external relations department. Seeing that she was stuttering, Ding Meng smiled and said, "It's okay, Sister Lu." Ayla was still a little nervous. "Mr. Ting, to avoid trouble, let's go to the banquet hall." "It's okay. It's good here. We're not going anywhere." Ding Meng comforted her. "I'm not afraid of all kinds of trouble." It made sense that he didn't leave. If the people from other sects came to find trouble, he would have left long ago. However, Blue Light Group had a grudge with him on Azure Tree Planet. This time, he could take him down a notch. Wu Ji was stubborn and confident. About 10 minutes later, a large group of people came from afar aggressively. Wu Ji, who was covered in dirt, walked in front of the group and kept shouting, "Yes, it's these little bastards. I've checked the guest list. They're from Long Voyage Alliance." "Since when did Long Voyage Alliance have the right to bully our Blue Light Group?" Ding Meng smiled again. "Are these the reinforcements you've asked for?" Wu Ji said angrily, "You're all going to die. How dare you provoke Blue Light Group?" He didn't finish shouting this time because a beautiful blonde woman in the crowd had come up to him. she said in a surprised and fearful tone. So, it's Mr. Ting. Sorry for the disrespect. The newcomer was none other than Jiang Ning, who had survived the underground temple on Azure Tree Planet. If it weren't for Ding Meng thinking that she was not a threat, she would have been killed. Now that she saw Ding Meng at the camp of the Water Sakura Society, she hurried up to greet him. Ding Meng smiled and said, "So it's you." Jiang Ning was a little flattered and lowered her head. "I'm very grateful for your understanding. Mr. Ting, are you interested in sitting down with me?" Ding Meng said, "Is this Wu Ji one of your people? I was eating and drinking here, but he just had to come and make trouble for me." Jiang Ning's face suddenly darkened. She turned her head and said, "What's going on?" Wu Ji was completely dumbfounded. He had invited Jiang Ning here, thinking that they could crush this group of country bumpkins. Who would have thought that Jiang Ning not only knew the other party, but judging from Jiang Ning's respectful attitude, he really couldn't figure out who Ding Meng was. Jiang Ning also glared at Wu Ji fiercely. She thought to herself, "You guys don't have any ability, but you dare to cause trouble. Don't you know that there are some people you can't afford to offend?" Back then, Ding Meng had killed Ji Yin in just a few moves. He had even destroyed the demon spirit that possessed Ji Yin. This kind of person was the center of attention in the Long Voyage Alliance, the Blue Light Group, and even the Holy War Army. You guys must have eaten a leopard's guts to dare to provoke him. Why aren't you apologizing to Mr. Ting? Jiang Ning said angrily. Ding Meng waved his hand, indicating that there was no need. Anyway, Ding Meng had beaten up those who deserved to be beaten up and tortured those who deserved to be tortured. There was no point in apologizing. What kind of recruitment event is this? Ding Meng was concerned about this question. Jiang Ning whispered, "Mr. Ting, the Water Cherry Society's project this time is very mysterious. They didn't reveal anything to the outside world. Moreover, it's hosted by Lin Aoshue. I heard that a few of the female stars of the Water Cherry Society will also be coming." So that was the case. Ding Meng thought to himself that most of the guests who came this time were not really here for the recruitment. They were all here for the goddesses. There were many beautiful girls in the Water Cherry Society, and they had always been the target of men from other sections. There were 5 girls that everyone paid attention to. They were known as the pillars of the Water Cherry Society and the 5 most beautiful girls. They were Su Lingwei, Lien Tingbai, Liang Yi, Lu Qing, and Shiwen. In the Divinity Wars planet ring, these 5 people's names were like thunder to one's ears. Everyone knew about them because they were all stunning beauties and were the goddesses in the hearts of many men. These 5, together with Lin Aoshue, were the 6 presidents of the Water Cherry Society. They were the real power holders of this society. Why would a bunch of widows come here for the recruitment? They obviously wanted to see the real face of the goddesses. If they were lucky enough to get close to her, wouldn't they be at the peak of their lives? However, Ding Meng had used his telekinesis to scan the entire place. In fact, most of the people here today were people like Wu Ji. There are also some good ones, but these good ones kept a low profile and chose to sit in very inconspicuous corners. When Ding Meng and the others were teaching Wu Ji a lesson, these people didn't even look up. These people were the ones that Ding Meng was interested in. As for the 5 female stars, he didn't care at all. Forget it. Let's continue. In the eyes of a straight man, a beautiful woman was not as attractive as chicken wings. This decision was firmly supported by Elephant and the others. Everyone began to eat and drink on the lawn again. This time, they still couldn't eat in peace, because 10 minutes later, flashes of light appeared in the distant horizon. Those with experience could tell that it wasn't a ship-class unit flying over this time, but a medium-sized starship. After the starship landed, there was a commotion at the entrance of the plaza. Needless to say, some big shot had arrived. The person hadn't even entered, but Ding Meng could already sense a large amount of origin energy fluctuations. Ever since he came to the God War starfield, this was the first time he sensed an extremely powerful aura, one that was even stronger than his own. This large amount of origin energy fluctuations were made up of warlord-level origin energy fluctuations. There were a total of 5 of them, But among these 5 people, there was an extremely subtle fluctuation that was difficult to detect. On the surface, this fluctuation seemed to be at the level of a high-level origin energy expert, so it wouldn't attract the attention of others. However, the fluctuation it emitted was both vigorous and stable, and it was illusory and illusory. It should be known that this was Ding Meng's perception. If even Ding Meng could only sense it to this extent, one could imagine how deep this person's foundation was. Perhaps unfathomable wouldn't even be enough to describe it. Xiao AI's voice was somewhat serious. According to my calculations, this person's strength is far above Chu Mingliang's. Ding Meng was also somewhat shocked. Chu Mingliang was an intermediate battle saint. Could this person be an advanced battle saint? Chapter 470. Night fell, and the lanterns were lit. At the entrance of the plaza, 4 warlord-level origin ability masters in gray suits slowly walked into the plaza, surrounding a middle-aged man. The orange light illuminated this group of people, and Ding Meng could finally see them clearly. These 4 warlords were all white-haired old men with extraordinary temperaments, while the middle-aged man they were surrounding actually looked younger. However, Ding Meng believed that he was definitely much older than the 4 old men, and that the unique fluctuation had come from his body. He wasn't very tall, and he was somewhat thin, but his lower body was very steady. His walking posture was also a bit strange, as if there was a slight pause after every few steps, and then he would stop and wave to the surroundings. At this moment, at least 3,000 to 4,000 people in the plaza stood up. Some cheered, some applauded, and some even whistled. Ding Meng frowned. "Who is he?" AI Lu explained in a low voice. "Sheng Tianfeng, the commander of the Holy War Army." Xiao AI immediately began to import information for Ding Meng from the database. Sheng Tianfeng, the 5th commander of the Holy War Army. When he became a commander, it was during the initial stages of the joint plan of the 6 major sects, and he was one of the important initiators. For the Holy War Army to become the #1 sect in the God War star field, Sheng Tianfeng's contributions couldn't go unnoticed. He led the Holy War Army to battle all over the world, creating a great reputation for himself. After the God War Alliance was officially established, he retired. According to the data, that was more than 200 years ago, and Sheng Tianfeng was already an intermediate combat master at that time. No one knew what his current rank was. After Sheng Tianfeng stepped down as the commander, he didn't hold any position in the Holy War Army, nor did he intervene in the management, completely living behind the scenes. However, his reputation was too great, and he could be regarded as an honorary member of the Holy War Army. Thus, if other sects had differences with the Holy War Army, they'd better consider this great god. The 3,000 to 4,000 people in the plaza were definitely members of the Holy War Army, so when they saw a meritorious member of the Holy War Army appear here, they naturally cheered, and Sheng Tianfeng warmly waved his hand to express his thanks. Just by looking at this person's kind face, friendly appearance, and approachable demeanor, one couldn't tell that he was an important person. Instead, he felt like he was a philanthropist. It was reasonable to say that this person usually kept a low profile. So why would he suddenly appear here? Was it because of this event? Sheng Tianfeng and the others directly stepped into the villa's banquet hall. As soon as they entered, a long and narrow starship appeared in the sky and slowly docked on the tarmac in front of the square. The beautiful receptionists at the entrance all cheered. Even AI Lee's eyes lit up. The bosses of our alliance are here. Of course, the Water Cherry Society couldn't be compared to the Holy War Army, but their formation was quite large. Before the leaders even showed up, 2 rows of beautiful women who looked like guards of honor entered the hall. They were all wearing uniforms and holding up the Water Cherry Society's crystal symbol. The square immediately became restless. The oligarchs began to make a fuss. Some of them were even whistling with all their might. Then 6 beautiful women walked in 3 rows. The leader was a woman with a noble temperament. As soon as Ding Meng saw her, he immediately thought of Dr. Xuyan. This was because this person's age, appearance, temperament, and demeanor were almost the same as senior Shuian's. She was full of the calmness and grace of someone who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Not only did she have a calm demeanor, but she was also full of the dignity of a superior. Ding Ming knew this person without AI Li's introduction. She was the president of the Water Cherry Society, Lin Aoshue, the real leader of the Water Cherry Society. Walking side by side behind Lin Aoshue were two young women with different graces. The one on the left was slightly shorter. She was wearing a green galactic dress, like a green lotus. She had a pure and pleasant face and a pair of big watery eyes. Even if she didn't say a word, she gave off a sense of otherworldly freshness, making it impossible for anyone to have any thoughts of profanity. According to the image in the database, this person was called Lian Tingbai. She was one of the higher-ups of the Water Cherry Society and had a very unique vision for energy development. Compared to Lian Tingbai's lively appearance, the one on the right was like a fairy who had walked out of the painting. She was also not tall, but she was wearing a very retro pink robe. Her face could only be described as delicate, like a mannequin. Because a real person would not have such a perfect appearance and temperament, this kind of pure classical beauty was usually very rare. This person was the brain of the Water Cherry Society, Shiwen. According to the information in the database, she was a master of statistics. If the two in front were to be said to be somewhat normal, then the three beauties behind them were charming and unrestrained. All three of them were very tall. The one on the left was the most classic urban beauty, wearing a white shirt, a short black skirt, black stockings, and high heels. When she walked, her long legs were very eye-catching. Her tangerine wavy hair was let down. Every now and then, she would touch the hair on her face. It seemed that her flirting had completely aroused the enthusiasm of the oligarchs around her. Xiao AI said, "This is Su Lingwei." According to the information in the database, she is a light speed user. She is very strong. Don't be fooled by her appearance. If Xiao AI said that this person had a strong foundation, then this person's strength couldn't be weak. However, Ding Ming could sense that the aura of the beauty in the middle was even stronger. She was dressed very casually, with a loose light yellow jacket, loose light yellow ankle-length pants, and a sun hat on her head. She walked very elegantly, as if she was walking on a runway. There was always a warm smile on her face. She had the mature confidence of an urban woman, but also a simple and unpretentious temperament. Her beauty didn't come from her face or figure, but from her temperament. Xiao AI said, "Liang Yi, electromagnetism user. It is widely rumored that she is already a warlord." Ding Ming nodded inwardly. There were indeed many experts here today, especially this group of beauties. Each and every one of them was as beautiful as a flower, but in reality, they were all bombs. None of them were easy to provoke. The last one was naturally the one on the right. However, when Ding Ming's gaze swept over her, it was already too late. A spherical blind spot appeared in his telekinesis vision, a kind of black hole. The last beauty was surprisingly also a fluxer. Moreover, she also possessed universal telekinesis. Her attire was completely different from Su Lingwei's. She wore a tank top that exposed her navel, a khaki windbreaker, and hot pants paired with knee-high boots, revealing half of her slender and smooth thighs. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, making her oval face look even more exquisite. Although she was not smiling, you could feel that she was smiling. She seemed to have a kind of innate enthusiasm, generosity, and youthful vitality, which was just as beautiful as her name, Lu Qing. However, the next instant, a hint of hesitation appeared in Lu Qing's eyes. She curiously followed the trace of the retreating gaze. She definitely wasn't using telekinesis vision to investigate, but rather her naked eyes. She quickly discovered the abnormality on the lawn, but she wasn't too surprised. Instead, she faintly smiled at Ding Ming. At this instant, the hearts of all the widows who were paying attention to Lu Qing trembled. In their eyes, it was as if the whole world had lit up. Everything in the surroundings became dim under her smile. This smile was truly like flowers blooming all over the mountains and plains. That kind of brilliance, that kind of brilliance, that kind of beauty, it was truly unforgettable for anyone who saw it. Without mentioning the others, Elephant, Junior Leopard, and Little Arrow all opened their eyes and mouths wide. They even forgot to eat the meat skewers and chicken legs in their hands. They were all dumbstruck by this smile. Junling was somewhat dissatisfied. He turned his head and said in a low voice, "Are you guys stupid? Have you never seen a woman before?" The three of them were still in a daze. At this moment, Lu Qing seemed to be fiddling with her wristwatch. After checking for a moment, she raised her head and smiled at Ding Ming again. At this moment, at least a few hundred pairs of eyes that could kill were focused on Ding Ming. This kid didn't have anything he wanted. His height didn't even reach her shoulders. Why did he have to win Beauty Lu's favor? Blind. Ding Ming couldn't remain calm. He wasn't surprised by Lu Qing's beauty, but he received a message in his mind. "Hello, Ding Ming. It's nice to meet you." Who else could it be if not Lu Qing's message? Moreover, this message also contained a mixture of joy, surprise, and sincerity. Xiao AI was also surprised. This woman also knows the mind transmission technique. She can't be cultivating the heart manipulation technique. Ding Ming nodded without batting an eyelid and replied to the other party with her divine sense, "Hello." But Lu Qing didn't say anything. Instead, she followed the group toward the entrance of the banquet hall in the Central Villa district. Xiao AI said, "We still underestimated this water cherry society. Who said that this sect is at the bottom? In my opinion, their strength is far above Distant Voyage Alliance." Ding Ming also expressed his approval. Up until now, the opponents he had encountered weren't weak, but there were very few women among them. The only exception was Lan Bing. But when Lan Bing was powerful, it was only because Ding Ming was still a warrior. But the people in front of him weren't just flower vases, especially Su Lingyue, Liang Yi, and Lu Qing. In other people's eyes, they were a beautiful scenery, but in Ding Ming's eyes, they were an extremely dangerous threat, especially since Lu Qing was surprisingly a universal-type flux energy user. In fact, what caught Ding Ming's attention the most was the age of the five beauties. Lian Tingbai and Xun should be around 50 years old, while Su Lingyue, Liang Yi, and Lu Qing definitely weren't over 40 years old. It was reasonable to say that everyone was young, but for them to be primary-level flux energy users in their 30s, this was already frightening. At this moment, at the entrance of the banquet hall, the group of beauties stood still. Lin Aoshue faced everyone present and urged her origin energy to speak. Her voice could be clearly heard. "Friends from the Alliance, thank you very much for coming to our Water Cherry Society's recruitment. I hadn't expected that everyone would be so enthusiastic and support our Water Cherry Society. Unexpectedly, more than 10,000 brothers and sisters have come. This really makes us feel overwhelmed by this unexpected favor. I, Lin Aoshue, would like to express my most sincere gratitude." Ding Ming also followed Ding Ming's example and lowered his eyelids. In his heart, he thought, "Your Water Cherry Society really knows how to have fun and doesn't walk the normal path. If these women hadn't come, I reckon that there wouldn't have been more than 100 people who have signed up." Chapter 471. There is nothing wrong with Junling's judgment. At least 90% of the 10,000 people were here to join in the fun. Only a very small number of people were really willing to apply for the recruitment. The Water Sakura Society rarely issued missions, and the ones they issued were very ordinary and trivial. But this time, Lin Aoshue was personally presiding over it, and Sheng Tianfeng was here in person. There must be something going on. Sure enough, after some pleasantries, Lin Aoshue's tone changed again. "Thank you for your support. However, we can't recruit so many people this time, so don't be disappointed if you don't pass the screening. The camp will be open to everyone for free for a week. Friends, please enjoy yourselves." This meant that a large number of people were going to be eliminated. Ding Ming and Junling looked at each other. The meaning in their eyes was obvious. Their group was definitely going to be eliminated because they had no qualifications at all. How could they be recruited? Sure enough, the beautiful receptionists of the various groups were lowering their heads and fiddling with their wristwatches. The Water Sakura Society was probably announcing the list internally. Dingming glanced at AI beside him. AI was also flipping through the screen. After a while, she helplessly spread her hands. I'm really sorry, Mr. Ting. No one from the Long Voyage Alliance made the cut. Ding Ming smiled. It's okay. It's expected. But thank you very much for your reception. Elephant muttered. Actually, it's good. We can eat and drink for free for a week. This place is pretty good. But as soon as she finished speaking, another screen popped up on AI Lee's wristwatch. Her eyes immediately lit up. Mr. Ting, President Liu invites you. Ding Meng smiled again. I knew it. Jun Ling glanced at him. In your words, did that woman take a fancy to you? Ding Meng smiled. The premise is that I have what she wants. Unfortunately, I don't. Jun Ling sighed. If you don't, then there are probably less than 5 people in this place. Ayla didn't dare to accept this. Lu Qing was a real star among stars. She had countless suitors, and her standards were very high. How could she take a fancy to Ding Meng, who wasn't good-looking? The key point was that Ding Meng did not have any qualifications. Furthermore, in AI Lee's eyes, the relationship between Ding Meng and Jun Ling was very strange. Even though the two of them were walking side by side, they didn't look like a couple. Yet, it made you feel that they were quite close. As expected, the banquet hall was designed in an open style. The dazzling hall took up an area of at least 1,000 square meters. Guests gathered in groups of 2s and 3s. Everyone held a glass of wine and chatted with smiles. Waiters carried trays and shuttled through the crowd. Beautiful music played. The atmosphere of the banquet was very relaxed and pleasant. However, after a quick glance, Ding Ming realized that less than 100 people were allowed to enter the banquet hall. Judging from their attire and the aura they exuded, Ding Ming guessed that these people were either of noble status or extremely powerful. In any case, none of them were simple. Lin Aoshua and Shang Tianfeng were standing at the escalator of the hall on the first floor. The two of them seemed to be happily talking about something. Judging from their smiling expressions, they were in a good mood. Ding Ming and the others didn't know anyone, so they found an empty table and sat down. Then, they continued their old routine of eating and drinking. The dining area in the south corner of the banquet hall provided a buffet. They could eat whatever they wanted. There was a wide variety of food. However, in this kind of occasion, other than Ding Ming and the others, no one would really eat and drink. However, there were still some unconventional people. Next to Ding Ming and the others, there was a person eating alone. What he was eating was actually a big bowl of noodles. This person looked quite young. He was a little thin, and his face was very pale. He gave people the impression that he was malnourished. However, he ate the noodles very slowly. He had to pick them up carefully and put them into his mouth one by one to chew slowly. A bowl of plain noodles was eaten by him as if it were a delicious meal. This situation was undoubtedly ridiculous. However, Elephant and the others didn't laugh. Instead, there was a trace of sympathy in their eyes. This was because they knew that if a person hadn't experienced real hunger, he wouldn't have maintained such a respectful attitude towards food. Therefore, when Elephant came back with a food tray, he also brought a bowl of noodles with chili oil to the person. Eat this. This bowl tastes better. The young man looked up at him and said, Thank you. After that, he lowered his head and ate the noodles again. It seemed that he didn't want to say another word. Elephant didn't care. He just smiled foolishly, put down the bowl, and returned to his original position. After eating for a while, the young man got up and left. No one knew where he went. Xiao AI said, This person is so strange. Ding Ming sighed. Don't underestimate him. This person is an expert. For Ding Ming to regard him as an expert, he probably wasn't an origin energy cultivator at the level of a war venerable or a battle master. Xiao AI said, But why can't I detect his aura? Ding Ming said, That's because his control of origin energy has reached a very high level. He can even control the slightest spontaneous fluctuation. That's why you feel that he's just an ordinary person sitting there. Xiao AI said, "Why can't I tell?" Ding Ming said, "It's normal that you can't tell. Pay attention to the bowl of noodles he left behind." Xiao AI said, "Is there a problem?" Ding Ming said, "He didn't eat any of the noodles that were cut off. They were all left in the bowl. However, he ate all of the noodles that were still intact. This proves that this person has excellent eyesight and is extremely picky when it comes to food." Xiao AI scanned him and said in surprise, "That's really the case." Ding Ming continued. His wrist was very stable when he picked up the noodles. There were no unnecessary movements, and he didn't waste any extra energy. His fingers were clean and slender, and his nails were neatly trimmed. There were deep calluses on the web between his thumb and forefinger, thumb and thumb. This proves that this person is definitely an expert in cold weapons. Xiao AI deeply agreed. "You're indeed an expert in this field." Ding Ming sighed. "The Water Cherry Society has recruited quite a few experts this time. I wonder what they're trying to do." Xiao AI said, "That's right. What are they trying to do?" While the two of them were still secretly communicating, Elephant and the others around them suddenly stopped eating and drinking, and all of them looked at him. The atmosphere suddenly quieted down. "What's wrong?" Ding Ming turned his head in puzzlement. "Excuse me, may I sit here?" It was a woman's voice. It wasn't a pleasant voice, but it was very gentle, like a trickling stream that seeped into one's heart. Before Ding Ming could raise his head, he felt many unfriendly gazes from all directions. When he looked up again, Lu Qing had already arrived at the small table. "Please sit." Of course, Ding Ming couldn't say no. If Lu Qing wasn't qualified to sit here, who else could? Ding Ming could be considered to have developed a certain immunity to beautiful women. However, even so, Lu Qing was still difficult to deal with. Because Lu Qing did not stand on ceremony, she directly sat down on the high stool next to Ding Ming. This distance was basically the couple's distance. The two of them were very close, and a fragrance wafted over. The fragrance was very strong. The next scene made everyone feel strange. Lu Qing placed both her hands on the table and tilted her head while looking at Ding Ming with a smile that wasn't a smile. Ding Ming sat there like a block of wood. The two of them maintained this posture for a long time without moving. They didn't even say a word, giving people the impression that the two of them were fixed in place by magic. But in fact, the two of them had already begun to communicate through divine thoughts. This time, Lu Qing took the initiative to speak, her voice full of joy. "After so many years, I thought I was the only Fluxer. Today, I finally met you." Ding Ming asked curiously, "Are there no other warlocks in the God Wars Starfield?" Lu Qing replied, "There are, but they aren't general-purpose warlocks." Ding Ming said, "I am general-purpose warlocks, but what is there to be excited about?" Lu Qing said, "We're the same kind." Ding Ming said, "So what if we are?" Lu Qing said, "Maybe you can help me." Ding Ming said, "Why should I help you?" "All right." Lu Qing was somewhat helpless. This was the first time she had met Ding Ming, this kind of straight man. She wasn't used to this kind of straightforward conversation. "Why don't you change to another man and try it?" She reckoned that he would have already kneeled down and licked her boots. However, she could also understand Ding Ming. They were both warlocks, so naturally, they had firm temperaments. Try to use a woman's beauty to close the distance between them didn't seem to work. Thus, she changed her words. "Didn't you come to apply for the recruitment? I can help you." Ding Ming's interest was piqued. "How can you help me?" Lu Qing said, "When I came in previously, I discovered that your blind spot was very large. Your mental force is far above mine, so it definitely won't be a problem for you to successfully apply for the recruitment. Just now, I mentioned you to President Lin. You and your friends don't need to go through the selection process. You can directly enter the final list." This was the attitude of someone who was asking for help. Ding Ming said, "All right, what do you need me to help you with?" Lu Qing said, "Maybe you can treat me." Ding Ming was astonished. "You are both a spirit ability user and a flux ability user. How can you fall sick?" Lu Qing said, It's a problem with my mental force. It can also be said to be some kind of illness that requires general-purpose warlocks to treat me. Ding Ming pondered for a moment and said, "You are saying that your mental force has been damaged?" Lu Qing said, "Yes, my mental force has been seriously damaged and has been unable to recover for a long time. I have consulted an authoritative figure, and this kind of injury requires the help of a similar type of flexibility user to treat. Originally, I'd already given up all hope, but I didn't expect that I would meet a flexibility user today. Therefore, I took the liberty of coming to find you. If I have offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. Is that so?" Ding Ming asked Xiao AI. Xiao AI said, "It is indeed possible that your mental force has been damaged, but I don't know what her exact situation is." Ding Ming immediately said to Lu Qing, "All right, but I want to know your exact situation." Lu Qing said, "This isn't the place to talk. How about we go somewhere else to talk?" Ding Ming said, "That's fine too." Just as the two of them stood up, an extremely gentle male voice suddenly came from in front of them. "Qing Qing, I was looking for you everywhere. So you are here." Chapter 472. When she saw the person in front of her, Lu Qing's expression didn't change. She still had a smile that wasn't a smile on her face. She appeared to be very magnanimous as she said unhurriedly, "Tianming, why are you looking for me?" This young man called Tianming was very handsome. His suit was well-tailored, and his attitude was refined and courteous. His every movement was brimming with a calm and magnanimous temperament. He was definitely one of the people in the Holy Battle Army. Ding Ming discovered that Tianming's extravagance wasn't bad at all. He was surrounded by a group of people, and the person closest to him was unexpectedly one of the 4 followers of Towering Heaven Peak, an old man. The old man's appearance wasn't anything special, so it was easy for people to overlook him. However, Ding Ming didn't overlook him. The old man stood beside Tianming, giving off a strong sense of protection. Xiao AI said, "Sheng Tianming, this is Towering Heaven Peak's great-grandson. He is currently the captain of the Holy Battle Army's Reconnaissance Department. According to the Information Center, not only is he young and promising, his innate talent is also very high. He is also an origin ability user and a flexibility user. He can be considered one of the young talents of the Alliance. It is widely rumored that he has the potential to enter the upper echelons in the future." So it was like that, Ding Ming thought inwardly. No wonder even Towering Heaven Peak's warlord-level follower had become his temporary bodyguard. However, Shang Tianming still smiled politely and said, "Actually, it's nothing much. The main thing is that we haven't met for a long time, so I want to invite you for a dance. I wonder if you would give me some face?" This banquet hall also had a performance stage. There was even a band station there, playing a gentle tune. Many men and women were singing and dancing on the stage. The scene looked quite warm. Lu Qing opened her mouth and said, "Tianming, I'm really sorry. I'm discussing something with a friend." Only then did Sheng Tianming's gaze fall on Ding Ming. "Oh, so you're Qing Qing's friend. Nice to meet you. Qing Qing doesn't have any friends of the opposite sex. I didn't expect to meet you today. I must get to know you." There wasn't anything wrong with these words, but when he said them, Sheng Tianming's face suddenly became expressionless. Ding Ming immediately transmitted a message to Lu Qing. "Have you successfully turned me into the target of your hatred?" Lu Qing's voice actually had a hint of smile. I didn't mean it, but this guy is really annoying. You should know who he is. If it's not convenient for you now, we can talk later." Of course, Ding Ming did not want to provoke trouble like Sheng Tianming. However, even if he did not want to, trouble would find him. That was the downside of participating in this activity. Because they had to sign up in advance, Sheng Tianming only needed to spend a few seconds on a wristband to check the basic information of Ding Ming and his group. "So you are an ally of the Long Void Alliance. Nice to meet you, Mr. Ding Ming." Sheng Tianming took the initiative to extend his hand. At least his attitude was polite. Ding Ming had no choice but to shake his hand. "Nice to meet you." Sheng Tianming's lips curled into a smile. "I wonder, Mr. Ting, Is your discussion more important than my invitation to Ching Ching? This was very impolite because this was his old trick. If you dared to answer yes, you were destined to offend the Sheng family. In the entire alliance, who dared to offend the Sheng family? If you answered no, you would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage, especially in this kind of occasion where many people wanted to see you make a fool of yourself. Sheng Tianming used this trick to scare off many of his love rivals. In fact, there was basically no one who was qualified to be his love rival. Originally, Ding Ming had the mentality that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. However, when he saw Sheng Tianming being so aggressive, he was a little unhappy. If Mr. Sheng thinks so, then so be it. If Mr. Sheng thinks otherwise, then so be it. It all depends on what Mr. Sheng thinks. This answer was reasonable, but in Sheng Tianming's eyes, it was undoubtedly a naked provocation. He looked at Ding Ming with interest. It seems that the Long Voyage Alliance is developing well now. You can even show your presence in front of the Holy War Army in this way. Ding Ming immediately frowned. If you have something to say, say it. Can't you just talk nicely? You're using the name of your sect to pressure me. However, Ding Ming's strength was now so strong that he was not afraid of any sect. So, he just answered calmly, "Is it interesting?" Sheng Tianming smiled. "It's right that you think it's boring. This is the result I want. If you think it's boring, then you should know how to behave." Ding Ming also became expressionless. "Well, I also want to invite Miss Liu to a dance." He was deliberately looking for trouble, and even threw this hot potato back at him. Sure enough, when he said this, not only did Sheng Tianming's face change, but the faces of the people around also changed. This guy was tired of living. Sheng Tianming turned his head and looked at Lu Qing with a smile. "Ching Ching, so you're talking about this?" "Yes." This Lu Qing was quite bold. She actually admitted it. Sheng Tianming slowly turned his head, his gaze sweeping over Ding Ming like an arrow. He said word by word, "Mr. Ting, this is the first time we've met. It seems that I have to make a deeper impression on you." The two of them shook hands and did not let go. It was not suitable to use origin energy in this place. So, Sheng Tianming released a large amount of telekinesis. However, the scene he imagined of Ding Ming crying and begging for mercy did not appear. Ding Ming was like a block of wood and did not react at all. He was still looking at him coldly. Sheng Tianming was shocked. His telekinesis was the most infectious type of telekinesis. With just a thought, he could launch a spiritual attack. However, it was completely ineffective against Ding Ming. Sheng Tianming secretly took a breath. His gaze became sharp again. This time, he released a telekinesis string. This string was like a spirit snake that drilled into Ding Ming's brain. Unfortunately, this attack was like mud sinking into the sea. Ding Ming still did not react. Sheng Tianming felt a little incredulous. This was a situation he had never encountered before. Lu Qing, who was at the side, looked at Ding Ming with a hint of surprise. She knew that Sheng Tianming was powerful, but Sheng Tianming's psychokinesis was completely useless in front of Ding Ming. What was going on? What else could it be? In Ding Ming's eyes, Sheng Tianming's attack was just child's play. It did not pose any threat to him. To be honest, even when they were on the expedition, Sheng Tianming's telekinesis could not shake Ding Ming, let alone now. Sheng Tianming turned his head with some doubts. His gaze was directed at the old man. Only then did the old man slowly open his mouth, hurry up, and thank him. Sheng Tianming was stunned. "Old Cheng, what's going on?" Old Cheng looked straight at Ding Ming. "Thank him for being merciful and not attacking you. If he had attacked you, you would be the one going crazy now." Sheng Tianming was completely dumbfounded. Could it be that this inexperienced brat in front of him was actually a hidden expert? Old Cheng took 2 steps forward and said in a deep voice, "I apologize on behalf of young Master Ming. Thank you for being merciful." Ding Ming had always respected the elders. "I wouldn't dare," Old Cheng continued, "but this is my family's business. Little brother, it's best if you don't interfere." Ding Ming said in a deep voice, "I don't look for trouble with others, but others often like to look for trouble with me." Old Cheng said, "It's a good thing for young people to have drive." Then, This old man would like to exchange a few moves with you. In fact, Ding Ming was already mentally prepared. He did not care about people like Sheng Tianming. This old Cheng in front of him was a real master. In Ding Ming's telekinetic vision, a force field in the shape of a square cage suddenly appeared and quickly enveloped him. Xiao AI said in surprise, "It's kinetic telekinesis." He has already cultivated the model of telekinesis. The model of telekinesis was the advanced form of telekinesis force field. A force field was a semi-materialized form formed by points, strings, and surfaces. A model was a real materialized product. It was more stable, more flexible, and more powerful. As soon as the cage was released, the old man's intention was obvious. Kinetic telekinesis was telekinesis. He undoubtedly treated Ding Ming as an object and lock him up in the cage. Then, he would throw Ding Ming out of the banquet hall. The cage was completely made up of 6 fine and dense nets. The nets suddenly began to shrink, and the cage slowly became smaller. Not to mention throwing it out, an ordinary person would probably be crushed out of shape inside. Ding Ming was also secretly increasing his telekinesis. He had not cultivated the model of telekinesis to that level, but in terms of foundation, he was not inferior to anyone. The hemispherical force field quickly spread out with him as the center. His goal was simple and crude: to use the force field to blow up the cage. Most of the people present couldn't see the fight between the two. Only Jun Ling, Lu Qing, and Sheng Tianming could see it clearly. The cage was slowly shrinking, but the bubbles in the cage suddenly appeared and slowly expanded. The cage was actually expanded instead. The air was popping. Obviously, it was the slight vibration effect caused by the fight between the two people across the air. Elder Cheng was finally shocked. He never thought that this young man in his 20s would have such a high cultivation level. Even his telekinesis model could be suppressed by the force field. This was simply a miracle that had never been heard of before. No wonder this kid had the guts to challenge Tianming. Since that's the case, I'll show you what real telekinesis is. Elder Cheng's gaze sharpened. The 6 nets that formed the cage became thicker in the blink of an eye and compressed down again. Ding Ming could not withdraw from this level of pressure, even if he wanted to. If he dared to withdraw his telekinesis, he would probably be crushed into a biscuit by the cage. Since this old man wanted to be ruthless, then why should he be polite with him? A cold light flashed past Ding Ming's eyes. In an instant, he released thousands of tiny dots and dozens of strings to attach to the surface of the force field. The force field quickly became material and brightened. With a loud bang, the air immediately exploded and a large amount of air burst out. Everyone was caught off guard and was forced to retreat. As for the tables and chairs at the side, they were directly turned into ashes by this energy explosion. The pots and pans at the back row of the food table flew everywhere. Elder Cheng was also forced back 2 steps, but Ding Ming was still standing perfectly fine. He did not even move his feet. Elder Cheng was also dumbfounded. Could it be that this kid was actually a spirit general? When did the Long Voyage Alliance recruit such a young and terrifyingly strong helper? What did the Long Voyage Alliance do to attract this young man to join? This kind of young talent should be the focus of our Holy War Army's training. He was still suspicious when an old voice finally came from behind. "Old Cheng, this is President Lin's welcome banquet. How can you bully a kid here?" Turning around, he saw Sheng Tianfeng and Lin Aoshua walking over with a large group of people behind them. Chapter 473. The person who spoke was naturally Shen Yanfeng. Although he was reprimanding, his tone was not reproachful. At his age, he could speak and do whatever he wanted. Mr. Cheng smiled bitterly. He wanted to bully this kid, but who knew that this kid would teach him a lesson? Lin Aoshua did not speak, but glanced at Lu Qing lightly. With her and Sheng Tianfeng's cultivation, how could they not know what had happened here? Lu Qing smiled awkwardly and did not dare to make sound. If she had not wanted to see Ding Ming's strength, Ding Ming would not have fought with Mr. Cheng. She had to bear a lot of responsibility for this matter. Lin Aoshua said, "It's okay to be naughty at ordinary times, but how could you be presumptuous in front of Mr. Chung? Hurry up and apologize." Lu Qing immediately bowed her head and said, "Mr. Chung, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me." Mr. Chung waved his hand, indicating that it was okay. His eyes had been fixed on Ding Meng. Sheng Tianfeng naturally noticed Ding Meng. He could not help sighing and said, "Little brother, you really make me ashamed. When I was your age, I was still a cook in the training camp." As soon as he said that, the tense atmosphere immediately eased a lot. Ding Meng replied, "I don't dare." Sheng Tianfeng glanced at Sheng Tianming and said slowly, "You always think that you are so. Now it's clear that you are still far from it. Go back and reflect on yourself." Lin Aoshua immediately said, "Has the rest area been tidied up? Treat Tianming well. Don't neglect our distinguished guest." As soon as she finished speaking, two beautiful receptionists immediately stepped forward and gestured, "Young Master Tianming, this way please." No matter how unwilling Sheng Tianming was, he had to leave the banquet hall at this moment. Since the two big shots had spoken, this place was no longer a place where he could stay. Sheng Tianfeng continued, "Little brother Ding, forgive me for being presumptuous, but why did you go to the distant Voyage Alliance with such good talent?" Ding Meng smiled. "There's no other reason. It's just that we're fated to meet." Sheng Tianfeng nodded thoughtfully, and then slowly opened his palm. A glittering sheet flew out from his palm. It flew very slowly, and finally stopped in front of Ding Meng. This was the first-class pass of the Holy War Army, and it was not a problem for him to freely enter and exit the headquarters of the Holy War Army. It was an extremely rare thing in the entire alliance. Sheng Tianfeng said meaningfully, "The six major sects are a family, and it is inevitable that there will be some misunderstandings between them. If Brother Ding needs my help in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. This small gift is my apology for my disappointing grandson." It had to be said that it was not by chance that Sheng Tianfeng could live to this age and have such a high reputation and strength. Even Ding Meng admired him from the bottom of his heart. Only he knew how powerful Sheng Tianfeng's psyche power was. The most difficult thing about telekinesis was not moving a large target, but such a small object. This pass was always flying at a uniform speed, without any deviation. The slower it flew, the more difficult it was to control the speed. It was like walking on a tightrope on a cliff. It was easy to cross it at once, but if you really walked slowly on the tightrope, it was true ability. Moreover, the tense situation was resolved by the two big shots in a few words. Sheng Tianfeng did not explicitly say that he wanted to draw Ding Meng to his side, but he gave him a pass and magnanimously apologized to him. It was difficult to dislike such a person. No wonder even Mr. Chung, a warlord expert, was willing to work for him. Ding Meng took the crystal sheet and carefully put it in his pocket. Then he said, "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Sheng. I will definitely visit you in person in the future." Sheng Tianfeng's eyes showed a trace of appreciation. Then, "Brother Ding, please go ahead. It's not suitable for us old men to participate in the world of young people." Lin Aoshua immediately said, "Please invite Mr. Ting and the others to rest in the private villa behind." AI led two staff members forward. "Mr. Ting, Miss June, please." This was to isolate the culprits. Originally, Ding Meng and the others had planned to eat and drink for free. But now, they had completely lost their footing. However, when they left the banquet hall, Ding Meng received a secret divine thought from Lu Qing. "I'll wait for you at Villa number 11 in Area D at 22 o'clock in the evening." The villa area in the camp was actually specially provided for the guests to use. It had all kinds of living facilities. However, when Ding Meng and the others saw that the villa hall had 3 cabins installed, they went into the induction cabins and began to cultivate without saying anything. Ding Meng usually did not use the induction cabins if it was not for special cultivation. Therefore, he sat cross-legged on the sofa alone. "What kind of technique is this psychokinesis model?" Ding Meng asked. Xiao AI said, "Actually, it can't be called a technique. It's a materialized energy that is condensed out of habit after long-term cultivation. There's a description of this in your green spirit divine tree. You might as well give it a try. Your psychokinesis can already build a model. Ding Ming nodded and slowly released his psychokinesis according to the method recorded in the divine tree. First, the spherical psychokinesis wave slowly spread out. Then, the tiny dots began to attach to the surface. Next, the psychokinesis string stabilized the structure. Then, according to his mind and will, he slowly turned it into a real model. This was the most crucial step. A model of the green spirit divine tree slowly appeared in the center of the room. This model was still not constructed very well. After all, the tree was a little small, and the overall structure was a little blurry. Don't worry, you're not familiar with this method yet. You still need to practice more, Xiao AI explained. That Elder Chung uses a lot, which is why it has such an effect today. His psychokinesis is actually not as strong as yours, and I feel that his achievements should be very limited. Little Rascal had explained this principle to him before. According to the normal cultivation process of origin ability users, most people would only be able to awaken their psychokinesis when they were at the champion level. Then, they would focus on tempering their psychokinesis. Although psychokinesis and origin energy complemented each other, most champions overlooked a problem. The psychokinesis of human origin ability users was built on the foundation of origin energy. Only when one's origin energy was deep enough would their psychokinesis grow. This was the case with Elder Chung. His psychokinesis was far inferior to Ding Ming's, but he was able to condense a model of his psychokinesis. It seemed very impressive, but in the end, Ding Ming's force field had shattered it. This was a classic example of neglecting the essentials and focusing on trifles. Thus, Ding Ming did not deliberately temper his psychokinesis. After studying the green spirit divine tree for a while, the time quickly reached 2200 hours. He guessed that the banquet should have ended. According to the message left behind by Lu Qing, Ding Ming left the hall on the first floor and headed to Villa D alone. Villa 11 was located next to a garden full of blooming flowers. At this moment, it was late at night, and the sound of insects was pleasant to the ear. Out of courtesy, Ding Ming took the initiative to walk to the main entrance and raised his head to look at the peephole on the door. After scanning the area, the door automatically opened. After entering the first floor of the villa, Ding Ming was surprised to find that Lu Qing was not the only one there. Su Lingwei and Liang Yi were also there. The two of them were sitting on the sofa, leisurely sipping coffee. Lu Qing, on the other hand, was playing a piano in the other corner of the hall. The music sounded quite beautiful. Su Lingwei was considered friendly. She took the initiative to extend her hand and said, "Mr. Ding Ming, please take a seat." Liang Yi, on the other hand, gave him a sly smile. "Are you a little disappointed?" Ding Ming was puzzled. "Why would I be disappointed?" Liang Yi smiled. "You definitely didn't expect us sisters to be here too." Ding Ming sat down on the sofa opposite the two of them. "Indeed, I didn't expect it." Liang Yi smiled even more happily. "You thought that little Qing asked you out alone, right?" Ding Ming's eyelids drooped. "You're thinking too much." "Huh?" Liang Yi was amused. "Don't be shy. There are many people chasing after little Qing. It's just that it's not very good for a man and a woman to be alone in a room together. That's why we're here. You don't have any objections, do you?" Ding Ming still said the same thing. "You're thinking too much. I'm not interested in so-called beautiful women." Su Lingwei was also smiling. At the same time, she handed Ding Ming a cup of steaming hot coffee. "I'm afraid that even Mr. Ding Ming doesn't believe your own words, right?" Ding Ming took the cup. He couldn't be bothered to deal with these two women who felt so good about themselves. He simply shut up and let it go. Su Lingwei smiled and said, "What's wrong? Are you angry? Or did I hit the nail on the head?" Liang Yi smiled and said, "Mr. Ding Ming, you're the first man that little Qing has asked out." Su Lingwei blinked and said, "I don't know why little Qing asked you out in the middle of the night. Can you reveal a little to us first?" Liang Yi smiled and said, "What else can we do? It's just a normal date between a man and a woman." The two of them seemed to be chatting happily, but in fact they were testing Ding Meng. The straight alloy man was too lazy to explain, so he simply took the initiative and said, I told you that I'm not interested in so-called beautiful women. In my eyes, you're just carbon. Are you worried about a man and a woman alone in a room? Now, even if it's one man and 3 women, you have no secrets in front of me. Liang Yi's interest was piqued. Are you not happy? Why are you so arrogant? Su Lingwe was also curious. You know our secrets too? Tell me, what secrets can we have? Ding Meng put down the cup and looked directly at Liang Yi. After a long time, he slowly said, Do you often make mistakes when you're busy? Liang Yi was puzzled. What do you mean? Ding Meng said word by word, white on top and black on the bottom. You're really weird. Pervert. Liang Yi blushed. She was the only one who knew what she meant. She had been in too much of a hurry before she flew to the campsite that day, so she made a mistake. The clothes she was wearing were white on the top and black on the bottom. That was why she wore loose clothes to cover it up. She didn't dare to dress too ostentatiously like Su Lingwe and Lu Qing. How did you know? Liang Yi was a bit angry. Don't be angry, Ding Meng said faintly. Your birthmark is half a lotus. It's on your left, but you probably can't even see it yourself. Liang Yi's mouth was wide open. You? Who told you that? Ding Meng didn't wait for her to speak. Also, there are 5 origin points of spiritual energy on your left leg. It should be some kind of technique. 4 of them are operating at the same frequency, but the remaining one is operating slowly and is relatively dim. It should be because you haven't fully recovered from your recent injury. You're quite strong. It seems that the person who injured you is not simple. Liang Yi was completely stunned. She said in a trembling voice, How? How do you know so much? Xiao AI sneered disdainfully. Nonsense. We can see clearly how many hairs you have on your body with our telekinesis vision. You're completely naked. Chapter 474. Liang Yi's dumbfounded expression told her that Ding Meng was telling the truth. Su Lingyue's interest was piqued. How did you know? Did Xiao Qing tell you about it? Ding Meng didn't bother to explain. He looked at her directly. Su Lingyue couldn't help but laugh. Did Xiao Qing tell you about my features? This time, Ding Meng didn't dare to answer. Even though he was always calm, he couldn't help but blush. Su Lingyue's physical features made him too embarrassed to speak. However, the moment he hesitated, Su Lingyue laughed mercilessly. You can't guess it, can you? Liang Yi was confused. Did he just guess? Su Lingyue said, Xiao Qing told him. Liang Yi was enlightened. No wonder. I was wondering why he guessed so accurately. Ding Meng said helplessly, Okay, Miss Su, I'm sorry. Su Lingyue smiled. Finally, you admit it. You're wrong. Ding Meng looked at her. When we were at the square, your clothes were still intact. Now they're not. As for the reason, only you know. I don't think I need to tell you. Hearing this, Su Lingyue's smile faltered. The reason was simple. This was her personal habit. Usually, when she was in public, she would be more cautious and pay attention to her clothes. However, it was different in private. They were indoors, and she was alone with her good friends. She didn't wear any undergarments on her upper body. It was mainly because some parts of her body were bigger than normal women's. It was uncomfortable to be bound by clothes. Lu Qing couldn't have told Ding Meng this information. Ding Meng must have found it out himself. Su Lingyue was startled. She quickly covered her chest with her arms. Ding Meng didn't think it was a big deal. It doesn't matter whether you cover it up or not. I told you that you're invisible to me. Su Lingyue yelled, You pervert. You peeked at me while I was changing? Peeked? Ding Meng was speechless. Do I need to peek? Or, do you have anything worth peeking at? You're not a high-level cultivation technique. I'm not interested at all. Su Lingyue was infuriated. No matter where they went in the alliance, they were popular stars. They had never been treated like this before. Judging from Ding Meng's attitude, he really didn't take them seriously. All right then. Su Lingyue was annoyed. I will let you guess again. If you are right this time, I will believe that you didn't peek. You are really capable. Ding Meng was speechless again. He sighed helplessly and said, Miss Su, let me make it clear to you. I'm not guessing or peeking. I've said that you have almost no secrets in front of me. It's fine if you don't believe me. Su Lingwei wouldn't give up. Keep guessing. Why aren't you guessing? I don't think you can get it right. Ding Ming didn't bother to explain. He glared at her coldly. Fine. You were wearing a blue dress at the square, but not now. As for why, do you want me to tell you? Su Lingyue's face wasn't just red. It was red from her face to her neck and shoulders. She looked like a red-hot shrimp. Tell me. Su Lingwei was furious. Ding Ming said casually, the dress you're wearing is completely transparent. It's for ventilation, isn't it? This means that your period came during the banquet. Su Lingwei was not the only one who was stunned. Even Liang, he was incredulous. This kind of thing couldn't be guessed. It was a woman's biggest secret. Even sisters wouldn't talk about it casually. Ding Ming continued. Also, it's best if you don't wear high heels for a long time. Those shoes aren't good for your posture. As a light-speed psionic, your feet are the most important part of your body. The spiritual energy in your right foot isn't flowing smoothly, right? Su Lingwei stared blankly for a few seconds before fiercely jumping up and shouting, Rogue! 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 Ding Ming's eyelids drooped, and he didn't say anything. I gave you a way out, but you didn't take it. Are you satisfied now? Lu Qing finished playing and leisurely walked over. She explained with a smile, All right, sister you. Ding Ming has real ability. You don't need to doubt him because I'm the same as him. We both cultivate spells. Su Lingwei was astonished. That's so-called flux, sir. Lu Qing nodded. We cultivate the same type of spells. Liang hesitantly said, But why can't you discover our problem? But he can? Lu Qing smiled and didn't reply, but Liang and Su Lingwei immediately understood. There was only one possibility. Ding Ming's strength was much higher than theirs. He could easily use his telekinesis to investigate them. Not only were their spiritual energy unable to suppress it, they also couldn't sense it. It was no wonder that even Lu Qing, who always had high standards and a proud temperament, had privately invited this ordinary-looking Ding Ming to her private residence as a guest. If Ding Ming really wanted to do something to them, what could he do to them? Would he be able to do whatever he wanted? Liang suddenly recalled that when they were at the banquet hall, Sheng Tianfeng had surprisingly gifted Ding Ming the pass of the Holy War Army. That wasn't an apology, but a gesture of goodwill. Regardless of which sect it was, they would fight over such a person. It could only be said that Ding Ming was really too low-key. He hadn't revealed his true strength in the slightest. Moreover, his qualifications were also blank. Well, Liang, he was a bit embarrassed. That is to say, you just saw us naked from head to toe? Ding Ming said expressionlessly. Trust me. Actually, there's nothing to see. Fine. This time, Liang believed that Ding Ming was telling the truth. Mr. Ding Ming, I apologize for my rudeness just now. Seeing that she was convinced, Ding Ming also said apologetically, I should be the one apologizing. Unless it's a last resort. I rarely use my telekinesis to examine the physical characteristics of the opposite sex. So, what happened just now was your last resort? Su Lingwei asked angrily. You were the one who forced me. Fine. I explained it to you, but you didn't believe me. Ding Ming said casually. Miss Su, it seems that you still have doubts about me. Do you need me to describe the new characteristics to you? No. Su Lingwei was so scared that she jumped up again. She walked to the second floor without looking back. You guys talk. I'm going back to my room to rest. Liang was smart enough to stand up and say, I'm a bit sleepy too. Xiao Qing, you talk to Mr. Ting. The two of them didn't dare to stay by Ding Ming's side for too long. As they talked, Ding Ming might reveal more juicy information to them. It was fine if only a few people knew about it, but once the news got out, wouldn't it be a perilous situation? Seeing the two of them running upstairs, Lu Qing sat down across from Ding Ming. I'm sorry. We don't usually hang out with the opposite sex. Please don't mind. Ding Ming waved his hand and said, It's okay. I don't usually hang out with the opposite sex either. Lu Qing said, Actually, I invited you here because I hope you can help me. Ding Ming said, You said that your telekinesis was damaged. What happened? Lu Qing stopped talking. She stared straight at Ding Ming. Ding Ming immediately received a telepathic message. This telepathic message was completely different from the telepathic message transmission. Ding Ming and Lu Qing opened their telekinesis vision at the same time. They were so close to each other that their telekinesis vision was completely dark. However, in the darkness, Ding Ming felt that Lu Qing's eyes were glowing with two auroras. The target was his head. The strange thing was that as soon as Ding Ming touched the two auroras, he could immediately see Lu Qing's vision. In her eyes, he was also dark. However, the two auroras established a wonderful connection between the two of them. It was as if the two of them had become one and could exchange their visions. What kind of spell is this? Ding Ming was very curious. This was the reason why he came here. They were all universal telekinesis warlocks. Lu Qing must have practiced some spells. There was no harm in learning more. Mao Xing's spells were too profound and complicated. Ding Ming was not suitable to practice them at this stage. When he asked this, Lu Qing was surprised. This is Mind Link. It's the most basic spell for us universal telekinesis warlocks. Ding Ming, don't you practice it? This was awkward. Ding Ming had only practiced those high-end spells. This Mind Link was not even worth mentioning in the eyes of Xiao AI and Little Rascal. Naturally, Xiao AI and Little Rascal's way of thinking wasn't absolutely correct. Their goal was to create the strongest king. Therefore, they had allowed Ding Ming to practice the fiercest and most valiant single-target cultivation methods. This Mind Link didn't have any offensive or defensive effects. With their high standards, they would definitely look down on it. Mind Link was a supportive spell. It established a real-time telepathic thought communication matrix between two or more people with psychic power. In other words, Ding Ming could see and hear what Lu Qing saw, heard, and felt. It was a real-time picture and sound that were completely synchronized. If Mind Link was used by two Flux Energy Warlocks to establish a connection of complete trust, it would display even better results. Their thoughts, emotions, heartbeat, breathing, and other information would be synchronized. They didn't even need to speak to communicate with each other. Damn, I don't know this kind of spell. Ding Ming felt somewhat gloomy. Xiao AI might have scoffed at this simple spell, but Ding Ming was fully aware of its benefits. Just imagine, in a large-scale battlefield, if the commander of a squad used this spell to synchronize the transmission of telekinesis with many people, all kinds of information could be seen at a glance. The combat strength of the squad would increase exponentially. At the very least, if you wanted to mount a sneak attack on them, it would be almost impossible. Naturally, with humanity's current technology, communication equipment and communication technology were quite advanced. For example, battle armor could communicate with each other. But in a battle, humans were the core. Everyone would run out of ammunition and food supplies, and there would be a time when they would be trapped. Once they entered a desperate situation, a Flux Energy user who possessed the Spirit Link would undoubtedly increase their chances of survival by a lot. I must learn this spell, Ding Ming inwardly decided. Fortunately, Lu Qing did not disappoint him. The telepathic thought information flow that was constantly transmitted included the cultivation principle and method of mental link. For Ding Ming, he knew how to use mental link in almost 2 seconds. Soon, Ding Ming's eyes lit up, and he aimed at Lu Qing's eyes. Chapter 475. The mental connection between the two was established, and something even more amazing happened. Ding Ming found that Lu Qing was transmitting a large amount of information to him. These information streams were not simple images and sounds, but a large amount of memory information. Once he came into contact with this information, it was like he was recalling his own past. He was completely immersed in the scene in his memory. This experience was exactly the same as when Ding Ming created the 8th origin. It was as if time was flowing backward, returning him to the past. Xiao AI said, "I understand now. Your telekinesis hasn't reached the level where it can invade the brain and directly devour memories. She must have taken the initiative to show her memories to you. In other words, she is introducing her specific situation to you. Ding-Ming had already seen that the memories that Lu Qing showed him were actually 26 years old. At that time, she was only an 8-year-old girl. She was not born in the God War Star Ring, but in the Thousand-Leaf Zone of the God War Star Field. Her father was a senior engineer in the development of starships, and her mother was a beautiful and virtuous housewife. This was a happy middle-class family of 3. However, this happy family was suddenly shattered in an accident. It was an interstellar trip. The sightseeing spaceship of a travel agency was returning to the periphery of the Thousand-Leaf Zone when it encountered interstellar pirates. The pirates not only looted the entire spaceship before the support starship arrived, but also killed most of the passengers. Lu Qing witnessed her father being brutally dismembered and her mother being raped and killed by the pirates. The huge shock caused her to faint in the pile of corpses, and she was lucky to escape. However, it was precisely this accident that gave her a huge shock and stimulated her brain. She actually awakened the legendary universal psychokinesis. By the time the support team arrived and rescued her, she had already become an orphan and was sent to the box sector. She wandered around the chaotic areas of mercenaries, black markets, and slave markets all day long. At first, she survived by foraging for food in the garbage. Later, she was rescued by an old mercenary of the hunting corps. This old mercenary had no wife or children, so he adopted the lonely Lu Qing and tried his best to support her on the path of psionicist. Lu Qing was smart and quickly figured out the cultivation method. She also came into contact with the cultivation principle of the universal psychokinesis. She used her psychokinesis vision to absorb psionic energy and made rapid progress. Her speed was even scarier than Ding-Ming's. Because she only wanted revenge, she trained as hard as she could. At the age of 16, she was already an advanced warrior, far surpassing her peers. However, unfortunately, the mercenary who raised her died in a mission. Lu Qing wandered to Cyprus Main Star and participated in the cruel arena qualification certification. There was no other purpose other than to enter the God War Star Ring and obtain the right to live there. This process was also very difficult. It lasted for 4 years, and she participated in 6 competitions before she passed. Each time, it was a cruel fight to the death. The most tragic battle happened in the 5th competition, when she encountered many experts on the same stage. At that time, her legs were broken. If her companions hadn't raised the money to send her to the medical center for timely repair, she might have been sent to Madison. When she saw this, Ding-Ming couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Lu Qing was far from what she seemed on the surface. She was beautiful, moving, and beautiful. Behind this beauty, she'd similarly struggled bitterly on the edge of life and death. And similarly, she'd tempered her firm through the years of wandering about. However, Lu Qing was still very lucky. After entering the God War Star Ring, she was accidentally discovered by the former president of the Water Cherry Club. She was brought to the club and personally trained her, Liang Yi, and Su Lingwei. The 3 of them could be considered the direct descendants of the former president. The new environment, friendly and harmonious companions, and abundant cultivation resources allowed the 3 of them to grow rapidly. Not only were they outstanding beauties of the God War Alliance, but they were also the stars of hope of the new generation. However, Lu Qing's path of growth didn't go smoothly. Because of the complicated experiences in her childhood, her cultivation gradually became problematic. Lu Qing was different from Liang Yi and Su Lingwei. Although the 2 of them were warlords, they hadn't awakened the power of telekinesis. Lu Qing had always focused on the cultivation of telekinesis, which slowed down the accumulation of energy. Even today, Lu Qing still hadn't broken through to the warlord level. She was still an advanced combat master. Ding-Ming suddenly said, "You'll lose your balance if you continue like this." Lu Qing replied, "I know. If I don't have enough spiritual energy to support my telekinesis, it'll be a big problem." Ding-Ming also saw from the information stream that when Lu Qing was 24 years old, she would experience some strange phenomena when she first started cultivating. At first, she thought that they were just illusions, but as her origin energy grew stronger, these phenomena became clearer and clearer. They spontaneously appeared without her control. Most of them were scenes of her parents being killed, and they were very bloody and tragic. By the time she became a combat master, these phenomena had escalated into painful memories that she didn't want to look back on. After all, Lu Qing had been bullied a lot during her years of exile. Before she entered Star Ring, she instinctively didn't trust others. It could be said that she didn't trust humans at all, especially men. There was a segment in the information stream that shocked Ding Ming. When Lu Qing was 15 years old, she was once caught by a mercenary leader. That man tried to take her for himself, cripple her, and sell her to the slave market. A beautiful girl like her could be sold for a very high price in the hands of the native gold earners, but Lu Qing desperately refused. In order to escape the disaster, she actually used a knife to cut her lower body into pieces. At the same time, she cut open her stomach and dug out her intestines. Her bloody and miserable appearance immediately ruined the interest of the mercenary leader, so he ordered his men to throw her into a smelly ditch and let her fend for herself. Lu Qing dragged her intestines and crawled on the ground for 5 kilometers. With her last breath, she crawled into a garbage dump. She relied on garbage for food, and after bitterly holding on for 2 months, she miraculously survived. However, these painful memories were completely out of her control. As she continued to cultivate, the more she cultivated, the higher the frequency of them appearing. When it was serious, her brain would be in incomparable pain. That kind of pain was simply unbearable. However, Lu Qing was both an origin ability user and a fluxer. Her own experiences had made her willpower strong enough. She relied on her extremely strong willpower to cultivate until she became an intermediate combat master. However, at this time, she finally couldn't hold on any longer. Lu Qing also explained, when I broke through from Spirit Martial Realm Level 6 to Spirit Martial Realm Level 7, that kind of pain wasn't something I could endure. It had already caused harm to my consciousness, causing my mind to become unstable and my consciousness to split. When I broke through to Spirit Martial Realm Level 9, the old president didn't allow me to cultivate anymore. Ding Ming also understood this principle. If she continued to cultivate, she would have suffered from cultivation deviation. Ding Ming suddenly sighed. You have hyperthymia. Hyperthymia, this was an automatic memory function that surpassed ordinary people. Simply speaking, it meant that a person could clearly remember everything that had happened in their life, including every sentence, every object, and every detail. It was a new function of the hippocampus region of a human brain that had undergone a mutation. Even today's increasingly mature medical technology didn't have an exact scientific explanation for it. Therefore, it was very difficult to treat. Hyperthymia wasn't an innate condition. It would only appear when it was stimulated. People with hyperthymia were different from memory experts. People with hyperthymia were trained to have a super strong memory. They could remove the useless memories and retain the important memories or beautiful memories. People with hyperthymia were completely different. They could automatically retain all kinds of memories, no matter how big or small. Moreover, they couldn't control the sudden appearance of memories. Hyperthymia didn't cause any direct harm to the human body, but was also absolutely useless. Because it was an illness, it would take up a lot of the human body's energy. In layman's terms, it would sooner or later empty your body. Ding Ming pondered and said, hyperthymia isn't an incurable disease. It can still be treated. It's just that the treatment effect isn't stable and will take a long time. Lu Qing sighed faintly. I know all this, but things are far from that simple. As soon as she finished speaking, Ding Ming received a large amount of information streams. These streams were all things that happened after Lu Qing turned 26. As her fame on the Divinity War Star Ring increased day by day, she finally entered the sights of many famous people. Sheng Tianming was a typical example. Sheng Tianming met Lu Qing at a private ball. From then on, he was obsessed with this socialite from the Water Cherry Club. At the same time, He began to pursue her fiercely. Because of his special status and his arrogance, he directly scared off many of Lu Qing's admirers. Of course, it was impossible for Lu Qing to agree to this young master of the Shang family. The reason was obvious. Other than her two companions and the old president, she did not trust anyone else. Moreover, Shang Tianming was a man, and a man with many wives and concubines. It was widely rumored that he had abandoned at least 50 women. Lu Qing didn't even have enough time to stay away from this kind of person, so how could she accept his pursuit? Soon after, in the triennial New Excellence Assembly held by Starlink, Water Cherry Association had sent Lu Qing, Liang Yi, and Su Lingyue to participate in it. In the end, the representative of Blood War Hall won the championship, and Lu Qing was ranked 8th. It was during that competition that Lu Qing encountered a fluxer from the Holy War Legion. In that battle, Lu Qing suffered serious injuries and stopped in the top 10. Ding Meng said, "The problem with your psychokinesis occurred after this competition?" Lu Qing clenched her teeth. "I originally had hyperthymesia, and after this competition, my hyperthymesia should have worsened." "Oh." Ding Meng was astonished. "Hyperthymesia can still worsen?" Lu Qing said, "That's what the old president analyzed." Ding Meng said, "Is the old president of your Water Cherry Club also a fluxer?" Lu Qing said, "No." Ding Meng said, "Since that's not the case, then it might not have worsened. Let me take a look at the side effects." This. Lu Qing clearly showed some hesitation. Ding Meng said, "It doesn't matter if it's inconvenient. You can just tell me verbally." Chapter 476. In the darkness, Lu Qing didn't reply to Ding Meng. From her expression, she seemed to be hesitating. She seemed to have made a great decision before she clenched her teeth. Then, her eyes shone brightly as she sent another message to him. This time, it was Ding Meng's turn to be astonished. The scene in front of him was truly. He didn't know what to say. The first thing that entered his eyes was Shang Tianming's tall and imposing figure. It was simply a photo album with all kinds of styles, postures, and handsomeness. Next was Lu Qing's photo album. These pictures were all of Lu Qing's daily life in Star Ring. Naturally, they were also extremely charming and beautiful. Next was the scene of the two people entering the wedding hall hand in hand. Finally, there were some unbearable scenes, such as Lu Qing's sweet and graceful panting appearance under Shang Tianming's body. "These are all illusions," Xiao AI suddenly said. Ding Meng was also expressionless. "This isn't worsening, but an infectious psychokinesis. She has hyperthymesia, so after being invaded by this infectious psychokinesis, her hippocampus region will become even more chaotic and unstable. Ordinary medical instruments won't be able to cure her." Ding Meng also reacted. This was definitely the result of the competition. The opponent had invaded her brain and forcibly instilled these illusions into her. Their intentions were extremely despicable and shameless, as if they were trying to brainwash her. They wanted to tell her that she and Shang Tianming were a perfect match and that she could only obtain true happiness by doing certain things with him. Therefore, it was said that psychokinesis depended on how a fluxer used it. If it was used on the right path, it would naturally benefit the masses, but if it was used on the wrong path, it would be incomparably harmful. This infectious psychokinesis far surpassed Lu Qing's common psychokinesis. After being injected, her cultivation had completely stagnated. Moreover, even if she didn't cultivate, she would still be tormented by these illusions until she wished she was dead. In the darkness, Ding Meng sighed deeply. "Miss Lu, thank you for trusting me so much and letting me see so much without holding back." Lu Qing, on the other hand, was very calm. Old President had once said that the first requirement to cure me was to be a flux energy warlock, because only flux energy warlocks can establish a mental link with each other. Ding Meng completely agreed with this statement. Although the spirit link could connect psionicis, it was a one-sided transmission of information. For example, if Lu Qing and Liang Yi established a connection, then only Lu Qing could transmit information to Liang Yi, while Liang, he couldn't transmit information to Lu Qing. But Fluxers were different. They could communicate with each other. There was another benefit of Spirit Link. After two Fluxers communicated with each other, they could share the pain of the illusions as well as the joy of each other's harvest. In other words, after Ding Ming and Lu Qing communicated with each other, the pain of Lu Qing's cultivation could be reduced by at least half. Lu Qing continued. Secondly, the psychokinesis of this flux energy warlock far surpasses mine. This was also reasonable. If Ding Ming was weaker than Lu Qing, not to mention sharing the pressure, the two of them might go mad together. Lu Qing continued. The final condition is that this fellow cultivator also cultivates universal psychokinesis, because universal psychokinesis is the source of all kinds of psychokinesis. If it is damaged, the psychokinesis of other types won't be of much help, she sighed again. But there isn't a single person in the entire God Wars starfield who can fulfill all three conditions. I've already been searching for 8 whole years. I had already given up all hope and was planning to go and beg for help after a period of time. Going to beg for help naturally meant paying a visit to the Flux Energy Warlock with the infectious psychokinesis and asking him to remove the illusions. Naturally, the prize for removing the illusions would be to agree to Sheng Tianming's outrageous request. Ding Ming also sighed. Even if you go and beg for help now, I'm afraid it's already too late. Lu Qing asked in astonishment why. Ding Ming said, I'm almost certain that he won't be able to remove the illusions now. You haven't broken through to Spirit General, and your cultivation has also stopped for 8 years. The situation in your hippocampus has become extremely complicated, but your mind is still normal, which proves that the memory fibers haven't been completely destroyed. Lu Qing looked at him with her beautiful eyes and said earnestly, but when I met you in the plaza, I discovered that your blind spot was much larger than mine. I knew that I had hope again. Ding Ming felt some sympathy for Lu Qing's bitter experience. He was also moved by Lu Qing's bitter struggle to survive because it was quite similar to his own. Everyone was a fellow cultivator who had struggled through life and death situations, so there was no need to keep her at arm's length, let alone make things difficult for her. Ding Ming sighed. I also don't have complete certainty that I can cure you. Lu Qing said, but you have a way, right? Ding Ming definitely had to consult Xiao AI about his method. Xiao AI said, what I can be sure of is that you first have to repair her memory fibers, just like how you treated Fan Chengying. However, Fan Chengying is a warlord, but she isn't. She has hyperthymesia, and these illusions have tortured her for 8 years. You can only use the old method of transmitting some positive information to her. However, she's not an ordinary person, and some simple images won't be able to cure her. Ding Ming frowned and said, how should I treat her? Xiao AI hesitated and said, this is exactly what Principal Zhu Bin mentioned back then. The real dominant force is the evolutionary domain related to value rationality, and that is your memory. Ding Ming, you've also experienced a lot of painful memories, but Little Rascal once said that she saw many valuable qualities in you. If you really want to cure her, you have to transmit your memories to her. Those memories are full of passion, justice, kindness, and everything positive. Once they're instilled in her, they can naturally dispel the infectious psychokinesis. As for whether it can cure hyperthymesia, this will depend on luck. In the end, it still depends on whether you trust her or not. I understand. Ding Ming nodded and looked up at Lu Qing again. Miss Lu, I do have a way, but I can't promise you whether it will work or not. Lu Qing's eyes glowed. It doesn't matter. What do you need, Mr. Ding Ming? Just tell me. Ding Ming sighed. Miss Lu, my method is to use psychokinesis to enter your brain and dispel these negative illusions for you. At the same time, I will instill my memories into you. Your mind link can't resist it. Do you understand what I mean? Of course, Lu Qing understood that this meant that her mental link had to be completely opened up. Just like the mainframe system on the starship, it required full access. In other words, Ding Ming could see all the secrets on Lu Qing. Lu Qing hesitated for a moment, then decisively raised her head and said, "No problem. As long as I don't suffer this torture, I'll do anything you want me to do. Of course, I can't accept that bastard Sheng Tianming." Ding Ming sighed. "Don't worry, I'm not Sheng Tianming," Lu Qing said. "Then let's start now." The two of them immediately sat cross-legged on the sofa. Ding Ming was now actively transmitting the mind link. A large number of psychokinesis dots quickly entered Lu Qing's brain. Ding Ming quickly switched to Xiao AI's microscopic view. This scene was very familiar. The memory neurons in Lu Qing's brain were indeed like jellyfish tissues, connected by crystal clear fibers. However, Lu Qing was completely different from Fan Qingying back then. The entire narrow and long hippocampus area was already turning black. The memory fibers were no longer simply yellow and red. They were completely black. This was already on the verge of collapse. Seeing this scene, Ding Ming was somewhat impressed. She could still hold on under such huge mental pressure. He had to admit that Lu Qing's willpower was also first class. Xiao AI said, "It will take some time, and it will be very painful for her." Ding Ming nodded. "Miss Lu, I'm afraid that repairing your memory fibers will require some pain in your brain. If you can't hold on, please say something." Lu Qing said, "I can definitely hold on." Although she said she could hold on, in fact, her head was in extreme pain. This was because Ding Ming found that the hippocampus area was very unstable. He had to continuously inject more psychokinesis dots to stabilize the memory fibers. As the fibers gradually regained their brightness, beads of sweat fell from Lu Qing's head. Her whole body was trembling from the pain in her brain. Not long after, she was drenched in sweat. Xiao AI said, "Okay, now we'll start injecting your memory." Ding Ming also understood that he had to be selective when injecting his memory. He could not transmit all the information about the cave virus to her. After thinking about it, Ding Ming still transmitted the complete origin of the T-shaped claw knife. He started with his eldest brother when he was young. The hardships of collecting the starweave grass. He was rescued by Huzi in a fire. He was given a knife when they parted. He fought bravely on the front lines and was rescued by the princess. Many years later, he returned to the border. However, his old friend had passed away. His eldest brother met Ding Wenhe by chance and then participated in the martial arts symposium. The scene where his eldest brother questioned the king left a deep impression. "May I ask the king if this knife is considered the best knife in the world this year?" The hero's knife was passed down from generation to generation. Generation after generation, people gave their all for it. Ding Ming's memory fell back to that distant winter. In the snowstorm, the image of brother Zheng Ming leaped into his eyes. Every time he recalled brother Zheng Ming, Ding Ming's eyes would always brim with tears. "Ding Ming, my good brother, if I meet with misfortune this time, please take back this knife and protect it well. Let the hero's knife be passed down from generation to generation. Our big brother of each generation has not let down the previous generation's trust." With that, he took the claw knife and strode toward the wooden house. Supporting Miss Qiao, he slowly and steadily walked toward the distant mountains. In the courtyard of the Tian family mansion, Zheng Ming's face showed no fear in the face of all the sects and nobles present. His voice was sonorous and powerful. "You want me to give Skywing a chance to turn over a new leaf? Then, who will return her a life of bliss and innocence?" The hero's knife was never afraid of any power or nobility. In the courtyard, there were flashes of light and shadows of swords and air currents. After 20 rounds, Zhanlong's dagger fell from his hand. His right wrist was dripping with blood. However, after 20 rounds, brother Zheng Ming collapsed in a pool of blood. Miss Qiao was wailing like a madwoman. "Live well." These were brother Zheng Ming's last words before he died. These words were not only left for Miss Qiao, but also encouraged Ding Ming to move forward bravely and never back down. Looking at these images, listening to these voices, and looking at these faces, tears welled up in Lu Qing's eyes unknowingly. At that moment, in Lu Qing's eyes, Ding Ming, who was not handsome and short, had become really tall and mighty. The spiritual link made the two of them understand each other very well. Moreover, as Ding Ming's telekinesis strengthened, Ding Ming could see her secrets. She could also see the scenes that Ding Ming had never shown her before. These scenes were not even seen by Little Love and Little Rascal. On the border of the Darway dynasty, a middle-aged man that held a tattered blade was standing by the side of a rock, and he was looking towards the distant horizon. The sky was gray, cold winds wreaking havoc in the air. It was already close to the end of the year. This type of weather wasn't good, but the man still stood there without moving. A person quickly appeared on the small path in the cold wind. It was a skinny little girl with ragged clothes. She looked to be around 12 or 13 years old. She was clearly cold to the point where her entire body was shaking, but when she walked, her back was straight, as if she didn't fear the cold that was about to arrive at all. The man didn't open his mouth to say anything. It was because on this barren border, this type of childlike refugee could be seen everywhere. This little girl wasn't the first, and she definitely wouldn't be the last. He didn't open his mouth, but the little girl instead stopped. She looked around curiously, her eyes full of disbelief. There weren't many decent huts on this piece of land. Most of them were simple huts made of weeds and scraps. Many people huddled inside to keep warm. Looking at these people's pale and even green faces, it was clear that these people must have been hungry for a long time. "What are you looking at?" The man finally still spoke. The little girl turned around to look at him, sizing up his padao. "Who are you?" The man replied disdainfully. "Good question. Can't you tell who I am?" The little girl said, "Of course I know what you're wearing. You're the protector of this village. I'm just curious about your name." The citizen official said, "Is it important whether or not he has a name? Just call me the protector of the people." The little girl looked at him for a long time and said, "All right, Lord Protector, you're different from the protectors I've seen." The protector glanced at her. "What's different?" The little girl said seriously, "You're not like the other protectors. You're a good person." The protector revealed a bitter smile. "I've been guarding here for 9 years. You're the first person to say that I'm a good person." The little girl was puzzled. "Am I wrong?" The protector said, "Maybe you're right, maybe you're not." The little girl seemed to find the protector a little boring, so she turned her head and looked around. "It's almost the end of the year, but why isn't this village lively at all?" The protector said, "Because these people can't afford to eat, so it's not lively." The little girl was surprised.